Gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to day 2 of the Economic Times World Leaders Forum 2026. I'm Ritika Jhanji Jagtiani, your host for the forum.
And I'm your co-host Suresh Venkat. After everything we packed into day 1, it's very good to see so many familiar faces back in the room.
Now, before our opening address, a quick reminder that simultaneous Hindi to English translation is available. Headsets can be collected from the counter at the back of the room and returned there at the end of the session.
Ladies and gentlemen, we begin day 2 with Uttarakhand and with an ambition that reaches beyond the state's established strengths in tourism.
Under the leadership of our first guest this morning, that ambition has broadened considerably with the push across infrastructure, investment, tourism, employment, and sustainable development. From the Global Investors Summit to initiatives such as the House of Himalayas, the effort has been to create more economic opportunity around the state's strengths while keeping its Himalayan character firmly in view.
Now serving in his second consecutive term as Chief Minister, he has also pursued a wider reform agenda spanning governance, women's empowerment, and employment. His address today is titled Uttarakhand's Next Leap from Tourism Capital to Economic Powerhouse.
Ladies and gentlemen, with a generous round of applause, let's welcome onto the stage the Honorable Chief Minister of Uttarakhand, Shri Pushkar Singh Dhami.
द इकोनॉमिक्स टाइम्स वर्ल्ड लीडरशिप फोरम में उपस्थित टाइम्स ऑफ इंडिया ग्रुप के शिवा कुमार जी, मोहित जैन जी, सुरेंद्र जी, चापका जी, धनुबीर सिंह जी, सुरजीत सिंह कुमार जी, उत्तराखंड इन हिमालय राज्यों में पहले नंबर पर आया है और पूरे देश के सभी राज्यों में भी हमारा नंबर 11वें पर आया है। SDG सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट गोल्स में उत्तराखंड को पूरे देश के अंदर सभी राज्यों में उस इंडेक्स में पहला नंबर मिला है। और कुछ कानून हमने बनाए, कुछ ऐतिहासिक निर्णय हमने लिए हैं और सबसे पहले लिए हैं UCC जैसा कानून सबसे पहले उत्तराखंड में लागू हुआ और ये हमारा उत्तराखंड की जनता के साथ हमारा कमिटमेंट था। हमारे प्रधानमंत्री आदरणीय मोदी जी के लीडरशिप में हमने असेंबली के इलेक्शन में जब हम गए थे तो हमने कहा था कि हमारी सरकार बनते ही हम सबसे पहले UCC जैसा कानून लागू करेंगे। हमने UCC का कानून लागू कर दिया और आज लगभग 1.5 साल हो गए, उसके बहुत बेहतर परिणाम आ रहे हैं। कुछ लोगों ने उसमें उस समय शंका भी प्रकट करी कि क्या ये कानून कुछ विशेष लोगों को टारगेट किया जा रहा है, तमाम प्रकार की जो भ्रांतियां होती हैं। लेकिन उस कानून के लागू होने के बाद आज जिस प्रकार का एक परिवेश बना है, माहौल बना है, एटमॉस्फेयर बना है और महिलाओं को, हमारे बच्चों को, बुजुर्गों को सबको सुरक्षा मिली है। और विशेषकर मैं महिलाओं की अगर बात करूं तो देश की 50% आबादी के लिए संपूर्ण सुरक्षा का 100% का कोई कानून है तो वो UCC का कानून है। और ये UCC की गंगा देवभूमि उत्तराखंड से निकलकर आज पूरे देश के अन्य राज्यों को भी लाभ दे रही है और सभी राज्य इस दिशा में आगे बढ़ गए हैं। युवाओं की, नौजवानों की बात आती है तो मैं आप सबको बताना चाहता हूँ, उत्तराखंड बनने के बाद कुल नियुक्तियाँ 50,000 से अधिक हुई, जिसमें से 34,000 नियुक्तियाँ पिछले 5 सालों में हुई हैं और एक भी मामले में हमारे राज्य में कोई नकल का प्रकरण नहीं आया है। हमारे यहाँ एक पार्टी के बड़े नेता आए थे और वो बड़े मंच से कह रहे थे कि एक भी नकल के मामले में देश भर में कहीं कार्रवाई नहीं हुई है। मैं बताना चाहता हूँ कि उत्तराखंड में अकेले हमने एंटी चीटिंग लॉ जब से लेकर आए 100 से भी अधिक जो लोग नकल में इस भ्रष्टाचार में शामिल थे, नकल माफियाओं से संबंध रखते थे और नकल करवाते थे, 100 लोगों को हमने जेल की सलाखों के पीछे भेजने का काम किया। जो अपने आप में एक बहुत बड़ा आंकड़ा है। और जितनी भी नियुक्तियां हुई हैं सारी पारदर्शिता के आधार पर हुई हैं। और आप वहाँ पर देखेंगे तो लोगों के अंदर एक अच्छा सरकार के प्रति भी, एक व्यवस्था के प्रति भी भाव बना कि जो लोग पिछले सालों में, जो बच्चे हमारे एग्जामों में अपीयर हो रहे थे लेकिन उनका सिलेक्शन नहीं हो रहा था, इन सालों में उन्हीं स्टूडेंट्स में से, उन्हीं यूथ में से एक साथ 4-4, 5-5 स्थानों पर उनका सिलेक्शन हुआ है। तो अपने आप में एक बड़ा काम ये हुआ। इसके साथ साथ हमने मदरसा बोर्ड भी वहाँ पर हमने समाप्त किया। और मदरसा बोर्ड समाप्त करने के स्थान पर, उसकी जगह पर हम शिक्षा की हमने एक अथॉरिटी बनाई, एक प्राधिकरण बनाया है। और उसमें हमने अन्य लोगों को भी शामिल किया है। उसमें सिख समाज के लोगों को, जैन समाज, बौद्ध समाज, ईसाई, पारसी, सभी को शामिल किया है। क्योंकि इसके पीछे हमारा हेतु था कि सभी को अच्छी शिक्षा मिलनी चाहिए। इन शिक्षण संस्थानों से ऐसे बच्चे निकलने चाहिए जो देश के निर्माण में भाग लें, देश के निर्माण में योगदान दें, राष्ट्र से प्रेरित हों और नेशन फर्स्ट की उनके अंदर भावना हो। और बहुत सारे मामलों में जहाँ गड़बड़ियाँ पाई गई थी, हमने 250 से भी ज़्यादा ऐसे मदरसों को बंद करने का भी काम किया। क्योंकि हम चाहते हैं कि देवभूमि उत्तराखंड, जो देवों का स्थान है, पूरे देश दुनिया में अगर भगवान के सबसे नज़दीक का कोई स्थान है तो वो देवभूमि उत्तराखंड है। इसलिए यहाँ शिक्षा के मंदिर होने चाहिए, न कि इस प्रकार की सोच, कोई विघटनकारी मानसिकताएं, ये किसी कीमत पर नहीं होनी चाहिए। तो ऐसे हमने ये भी काम किया है। इंक्रोचमेंट बड़े पैमाने पर था। इंक्रोचमेंट को हमने हटाया है। लगभग 13,000 एकड़ से भी अधिक ज़मीनें, सरकारी जो ज़मीनों पर कब्जे थे, उनसे हमने मुक्त कराया है। इसके अतिरिक्त इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर के क्षेत्र में बहुत काम हुआ है। इंडस्ट्रियल्स ग्रोथ काफ़ी हुई है। पिछले सालों में हमने इन्वेस्टमेंट समिट का आयोजन किया था और उस इन्वेस्टमेंट समिट में दुनिया के 50 से भी ज़्यादा देशों के लोगों ने भाग लिया। और एक धारणा होती थी कि इन्वेस्टर समिट होती है, MOU होते हैं और इतिश्री हो जाती, ख़त्म हो जाता है। हमने इस धारणा को बदलने का प्रयास किया और इन्वेस्टमेंट समिट के बाद लाखों करोड़ रुपए का इन्वेस्टमेंट, हमारा ग्राउंडिंग भी हुआ है, धरातल पर उतरी हैं चीज़ें। आज रेल का क्षेत्र हो, रोपवे का क्षेत्र हो, रोड का क्षेत्र हो, इन चीज़ों पर तेज़ी से काम हो रहा है। ऋषिकेश कर्णप्रयाग रेल लाइन, उसका काम बहुत तेज़ गति से चल रहा है और 125 किलोमीटर ऋषिकेश से कर्णप्रयाग की यात्रा आने वाले कुछ ही सालों में रेल से हो पाएगी। और वहाँ पर 4 धाम जाने वाले, टूरिज्म के लिए आने वाले लोग और वहाँ के स्थानीय लोगों को बहुत बड़ी मदद मिलने वाली है। देहरादून दिल्ली इकोनॉमिक कॉरिडोर पिछले 14 अप्रैल को इसका शुभारंभ माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के हाथों से हो गया है। और अब ऐसा लग गया कि मैं यहाँ दिल्ली में हूँ, अभी मुझे तुरंत इसके बाद हरिद्वार के कार्यक्रम में जाना है आप सबके बाद। तो मुझे लग ही नहीं रहा है कि मैं देहरादून से या हरिद्वार से कहीं दूर हूँ, क्योंकि अब हवाई सफ़र में भी 3-4 घंटा लगता है। यहाँ से आप एयरपोर्ट जाएंगे, एयरपोर्ट 1 घंटे पहले जाएंगे, 1 घंटा अंदर रहेंगे, 2 घंटा, 1 घंटे की यात्रा करेंगे। इसी प्रकार 1-2 घंटे वहाँ भी लग जाएंगे जहाँ आपको जाना होगा। लेकिन आप अगर रोड से जाएंगे अब, तो आप 2 से 2.5 घंटे में देहरादून और हरिद्वार पहुँच जाएंगे। तो ये इस प्रकार की प्रगति रोडों के क्षेत्र में हुई है। चारों धामों में आने वाले हमारे यात्रियों की संख्या बहुत बढ़ गई है। 47 लाख लोग अभी तक 4 धाम की इस वर्ष की यात्रा कर चुके हैं, क्योंकि 4 धाम ऑल वेदर रोडें बन गई हैं। हमारे यहाँ केदारनाथ जाने के लिए रोपवे का काम शुरू हो रहा है, उसका निर्माण चल रहा है। सिखों का हमारा पवित्र धार्मिक स्थल हेमकुंड साहब जाने के लिए भी रोपवे बन रहा है। इन दोनों ही स्थानों पर रोपवे बन जाने के बाद जिनकी यात्रा बड़ी कठिन होती है, विशेषकर जो शारीरिक रूप से कमज़ोर होते हैं, जिनका बुजुर्ग लोग होते हैं, उनके लिए 2 दिन 3 दिन की यात्रा होती है। उनके लिए यात्रा कुछ ही घंटों और कुछ ही मिनटों में पूरी हो जाया करेगी। आदि कैलाश जो हमारे भारत का पहला क्षेत्र है, 17,000 फुट की ऊंचाई पर है। वहाँ जाने वाले हमारे प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी देश के पहले प्रधानमंत्री हैं जो वहाँ पहुँचे, और वहाँ जाने के बाद अब पहले जहाँ पूरे वर्ष भर में 500-600 लोग कुल जाया करते थे, इस वर्ष 57,000 लोगों ने अभी तक आदि कैलाश के दर्शन कर लिए हैं, जो अपने आप में। हमने विंटर टूरिज्म भी शुरू किया है। विंटर टूरिज्म का भी एक नया अनुभव आया है कि पहले 6 महीने केवल लोग यात्रा पर आते थे। जब कपाट खुलते थे धामों के तब आते थे, लेकिन कपाट बंद होने के बाद भी उनकी डोलियाँ जिन स्थानों पर स्थापित होती हैं, चाहे वो हमारा बद्रीनाथ जी का जोशीमठ पांडुकेश्वर का स्थान हो, भगवान केदारनाथ जी का ऊखीमठ का क्षेत्र हो, या माँ गंगा का गंगोत्री के बाद अब उनकी डोली मुखवा उनके मायके में पूरे 6 माह रहती हैं, वहाँ पूजा अर्चना होती है। इसी प्रकार से यमुनोत्री यमुना जी की खरसाली क्षेत्र में रहती है। इन सभी क्षेत्रों में पूजा अर्चना चलती रहती है। यहाँ पूजा करने से भी पुण्य प्राप्त होता है, और विंटर में वहाँ का मौसम भी अच्छा होता है, पर्यावरण भी अच्छा होता है। आप आएंगे, देश दुनिया के लोग आएंगे तो उनको एक अलग प्रकार की ऊर्जा प्राप्त होगी, आध्यात्मिक ऊर्जा प्राप्त होगी, भौतिक ऊर्जा प्राप्त होगी, हर प्रकार से मन मस्तिष्क आपका अच्छा होगा। तो कुल मिलाकर मैं कहना चाहता हूँ कि उत्तराखंड इन्वेस्टमेंट की लिहाज से, टूरिज्म के लिहाज से और हर क्षेत्रों में, और हमने साइंस टेक्नोलॉजी और इनोवेशन की भी पॉलिसी हमने इस बार लॉन्च की है। उसके पीछे हमारा उद्देश्य है कि हमारा राज्य भी, जो आज वर्तमान की परिस्थितियां हैं, वर्तमान की चुनौतियां हैं, जो भी राज्य साइंस टेक्नोलॉजी इनोवेशन एआई इन क्षेत्रों में काम करेगा वो आगे भविष्य के लिए तैयार होगा, वहाँ के बच्चे तैयार हो गए, नई पीढ़ी तैयार होगी। तो हम हर क्षेत्र में काम कर रहे हैं। 34,000 से अधिक हमने पिछले सालों में नियुक्तियां करी हैं, जो हमारे नौजवान युवाओं के लिए एक बड़ा काम होगा। और इसके साथ साथ बिजली भी हमारे यहाँ पर बहुत नज़दीक से इंडस्ट्री को मिलती है, बहुत दूर ले जानी नहीं पड़ती है। बिजली का उत्पादन होता है और वहीं पर इंडस्ट्री को चली जाती है। कानून व्यवस्था अच्छी है, हर दृष्टि से अच्छा है। तो मैं एक बार फिर से शिवराज जी को बहुत मैं आभार व्यक्त करता हूँ। मैं तो इनसे मिलने आया था और इन्होंने कहा कि कुछ आप सबसे मैं थोड़ी सी बात रख लूँ, तो मेरे लिए भी बड़ा अच्छा हुआ कि आप सबसे इतने सारे लोगों का, और ऐसे लोग जो बहुत सारे सेक्टरों में काम करते हैं और उन क्षेत्रों को लीडरशिप देने का काम करते हैं, उन सभी के समक्ष आके ये छोटे से समय में बात रखने का मुझे अवसर मिला। मैं आप सभी को आमंत्रित करता हूँ। अगले साल हमारा जनवरी में कुंभ का आयोजन भी हरिद्वार में हो रहा है, तो आप सब उसके लिए भी आमंत्रित हैं कि अच्छा कुंभ हो, उसके लिए हम लोग व्यवस्था अभी से उसकी कर रहे हैं। तो मैं एक बार फिर से आप सभी का धन्यवाद करते हुए अपनी बात समाप्त करता हूँ। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
Ladies and gentlemen, once again, welcome back to Day 2 of the Economic Times World Leaders Forum 2026. A quick word of thanks to the Honorable Chief Minister of Uttarakhand. Now, Uttarakhand's opportunity lies in building economic momentum around the very strengths that made the state distinctive. Once again, thank you for your patience. I request you to remain seated. Our next session will begin shortly.
If you seek a land wherein finite possibilities meet boundless opportunities, where Asia's longest high-speed automotive testing track runs alongside the world's leading vehicle manufacturers, where 27% of India's organic crops grow across 11 unique agro-climatic zones, where over 300 pharma companies export medicines to 160 countries, where abundant cotton, silk and defense manufacturing hubs thrive alongside emerging industries, where a vast industrial land bank of 1 lakh acres awaits with abundant natural resources at your doorstep. When you find all these possibilities align in one place, you know you are in Madhya Pradesh, the heart of India. Come to Madhya Pradesh, the land of infinite possibilities.
The planned International Education City in Navi Mumbai will bring leading global universities together, creating a world-class hub for education, research, talent and innovation. Growth is reaching every section of society. Initiatives supporting women, empowering farmers through AI-enabled agriculture, strengthening fisheries, textiles, healthcare, education, medical tourism and skill development are ensuring inclusive, people-centric development. Through Maharashtra Climate Week, green industrial policies, clean mobility, renewable energy and responsible development, the state is proving that engagements with global business leaders, investors and foreign delegates across Mumbai and Maharashtra. The state is strengthening international partnerships and emerging as one of Asia's most trusted destinations for investment, innovation and opportunity. Through its diaspora engagement cell, Maharashtra is strengthening global connections and inviting the world to be part of its growth story. The state of Maharashtra welcomes governments, businesses, investors, innovators and partners from across the world to help build a stronger, smarter and more sustainable future. Maharashtra, powering Viksit Bharat.
Pragya Bhumi Bihar, the land of Buddha, Mahavir, Nalanda and Vikramshila, is writing a new chapter of growth. Under the guidance of Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi and leadership of Honorable Chief Minister Samrat Chaudhary, Bihar is emerging as India's next industrial growth engine. Welcome to Bihar, a rapidly growing market of over 140 million consumers, strategically positioned as the gateway to North, East and Northeast India. Why Bihar? Because Bihar has built an investment-ready ecosystem with 14,600 plus acres of industrial land, 95 industrial areas, plug-and-play infrastructure, reliable 24/7 power, surplus electricity for industrial growth, abundant water resources, multimodal logistics, expanding airports and world-class road connectivity. Bihar offers businesses speed, scale and seamless connectivity. The proposed nuclear energy project further reflects Bihar's commitment to building a clean, resilient and future-ready industrial economy. Why now? Because Bihar is creating the perfect environment for investment. The Bihar Industrial Investment Promotion Package 2025. Investor-friendly sectoral policies and a single window clearance system with approvals within 30 days ensure businesses can invest with confidence. Competitive land cost, an affordable workforce and lower operational expenses enable investors to achieve higher returns while serving one of the India's fastest growing domestic markets. Driven by good governance, Bihar has created a transparent, responsive and investor-friendly ecosystem. Initiatives like Sahyog Shivir have strengthened citizen satisfaction through efficient grievance redressal, reinforcing confidence in governance and enhancing the ease of doing business. Bihar is nurturing the workforce of tomorrow through emerging educational institutions, AI initiatives, innovation ecosystems and large-scale skill development, creating one of India's youngest and most future-ready talent pools. Beyond manufacturing, Bihar offers immense opportunities in healthcare, advanced manufacturing, satellite townships, logistics, tourism, sports infrastructure, semiconductor-related industries, and next-generation innovation ecosystems. The infrastructure is ready. The talent is ready. The policies are ready. The world is looking for its next growth destination. That destination is Bihar. From the land of legacy to the land of limitless opportunities, Bihar is ready for industry. Invest in Bihar. Invest in India's next growth story. The future begins here.
प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी के दूरदर्शी नेतृत्व में सेवा, सुशासन और विकास को समर्पित 12 वर्षों की राष्ट्र निर्माण की ऐतिहासिक यात्रा ने उत्तराखंड को नई गति, नई दिशा और नया विश्वास दिया है।
उत्तराखंड में विकास का महायज्ञ चल रहा है, जो इस देवभूमि की गरिमा को भी बढ़ा रहा है।
प्रधानमंत्री जी के मार्गदर्शन और मुख्यमंत्री श्री पुष्कर सिंह धामी के नेतृत्व में डबल इंजन सरकार आज विकसित भारत में विकसित उत्तराखंड के संकल्प को तेजी से साकार कर रही है। आज उत्तराखंड में केंद्र सरकार की 2 लाख करोड़ रुपए से अधिक की विकास परियोजनाओं पर कार्य प्रगति पर है। डिजिटल इंडिया अभियान ने प्रदेश के दूरस्थ क्षेत्रों में इंटरनेट कनेक्टिविटी, ई गवर्नेंस और डिजिटल सेवाओं को विस्तार प्रदान किया है। भारत नेट परियोजना के तहत गांव-गांव में इंटरनेट पहुंचाया जा रहा है। साथ ही स्किल इंडिया, स्टार्टअप इंडिया, मेक इन इंडिया और मुद्रा योजना जैसे अभियानों के माध्यम से उत्तराखंड का युवा गढ़ रहा है आत्मनिर्भर और स्वर्णिम भविष्य। वहीं 4 धाम ऑल वेदर रोड परियोजना, दिल्ली देहरादून एक्सप्रेसवे, ऋषिकेश कर्णप्रयाग रेल परियोजना, टनकपुर बागेश्वर रेल लाइन की स्वीकृति, अमृत भारत स्टेशन योजना के अंतर्गत 11 रेलवे स्टेशनों का आधुनिकीकरण, उड़ान योजना के तहत हवाई सेवाओं का विस्तार और पर्वतमाला परियोजना के अंतर्गत विकसित होता रोपवे नेटवर्क उत्तराखंड में कनेक्टिविटी, पर्यटन और विकास को नई ऊंचाइयां दे रहे हैं। केदारनाथ बद्रीनाथ धाम पुनर्विकास, मानसखंड मंदिरमाला मिशन और शीतकालीन यात्रा को बढ़ावा उत्तराखंड को वर्ष भर आध्यात्मिक और पर्यटन विकास की नई पहचान दे रहे हैं। वहीं रेड इन उत्तराखंड, होम स्टे, आयुष्मान भारत, आधुनिक स्वास्थ्य सेवाएं, औद्योगिक विकास और वाइब्रेंट विलेज जैसी योजनाएं प्रदेश में रोजगार, स्वास्थ्य और सीमांत विकास को नई मजबूती प्रदान कर रही हैं। जन कल्याण से जन विश्वास तक डबल इंजन सरकार के साथ उत्तराखंड रच रहा है प्रगति का नया अध्याय।
Rich heritage to a powerful growth story. Chhattisgarh is rising with new ambition. Under the visionary leadership of Chief Minister Shri Vishnu Dev Sai, the state is scripting a new chapter of growth, development and opportunity. 6.31 lakh crore rupees GDP, strengthening the state's economy. 8 lakh crore rupees plus investment proposals. 51,000 crore rupees rail projects transforming connectivity. Bastar is transforming. Chhattisgarh is not just growing, it is emerging as India's new growth engine.
At this moment, the planet is waking up. It is happening now. One good thing lighting up another. People getting curious. Cities figuring things out. Oceans getting a chance to recover. Because when energy stops taking, when it just gives, people can move, really move, and you can feel it. Doubt's losing ground because good is rising. When every big leap forward is powered by energy that only gives without taking, good things multiply. At this moment, the world's evolving. And so is energy. Suzlon, good energies that work.
We request all our guests to kindly take their seats. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for day 2 of the Economic Times World Leaders Forum 2026. If you were here on day 1, you know that yesterday took us across business, technology, capital, media, and geopolitics, all the way to the Honorable Prime Minister's address last evening.
And today we pick up in a world where many of those conversations are becoming harder to separate. Trade is now a strategic question, technology a geopolitical one. Energy is as much about security as it is about sustainability. And the choices countries make increasingly show up in the decisions that businesses have to make.
And this gives us quite a range of conversations coming up ahead on day 2 today. We began this morning with the Honorable Chief Minister of Uttarakhand, Shri Pushkar Singh Dhami, setting out his vision for the state's economic leap.
And from there, we'll move to former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Boris Johnson, as he widens the lens to a balance of power that is changing once again. The day will also take us through global trade, clean energy, the growth ambitions of Madhya Pradesh, defense manufacturing, and the India UAE investment corridor. We'll also turn to the world of sport as well and to what AI is doing to make possible for builders and creators.
And I think by day 2, most of you know the other rule of this forum, that is not every conversation is on the program.
Some of them begin immediately after it.
And preferably without making you late for the next session.
On that note, we'd like to thank the partners who made the Economic Times World Leaders Forum 2026 possible. Our presenting partners, Spec Finance, powered by Visa, and co-powered by Suzlon and Casa Grande.
A big thank you to our category partners, Google and RRP Defense Limited, our knowledge partner, PwC, and our state partners, the Government of Madhya Pradesh, the Government of Bihar, the Government of Maharashtra, Government of Chhattisgarh, and Government of Uttarakhand, and our tourism partner, Delhi Tourism.
And our associate partners, IOB, Chennai Port Authority, GMDC, Skoda, Anand Technologies, Rasna Foundation, and Truecaller.
And as we go through the day, please make sure that you keep the conversation going online as well. Share your takeaways generously across social media. But while you do that, do not forget our hashtag, that is hashtag ETWLF 2026. And don't forget to tag the Economic Times. And also, if one of today's sessions gives a reason for you to continue the conversation, please make sure you connect with fellow speakers and members here by downloading the ETWLF networking app on the Apple Store or the Google Play Store.
Our next conversation widens the lens to the changing balance of power across the world. Ladies and gentlemen, our next conversation, like I said, takes us into a world whose old certainties are becoming considerably less certain. Trade is being recast by geopolitics, alliances are being tested, Europe is rethinking security, China's rise continues to reshape the global balance, and India's relationship with the West is evolving at the same time.
And few political leaders have had a closer view of several of those shifts than our guest this morning, ladies and gentlemen. As the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom from 2019 to 2022, he led Britain through Brexit, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the opening months of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And before that, he served as Foreign Secretary and twice as Mayor of London.
Today, he joins us for a conversation titled The World After the West, Geopolitics, China, India, and the US, and the New Power Balance. A brief security announcement before we invite the guest onto stage. Please remain seated during the conversation and after the conversation. Do not stand up at any point of time. This is a security concern. We thank you for your cooperation.
So let's get going with the conversation, ladies and gentlemen, with a generous round of applause. Let's welcome onto the stage the exec editor of Economic Times, Shrutijit KK, in a very special conversation with former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Mr. Boris Johnson.
Popular journalist and columnist, an orator with a real knack for entertaining listeners. Multiple terms as Mayor of London, two terms Foreign Secretary, Prime Minister. What an extraordinary career so far, and a politician with a real sense for the pulse of the people. Boris, it's a real pleasure to have you with us here today.
SK, it's a great honor to be here, and thank you very much. It's wonderful to be back in India. Absolutely wonderful.
You've been coming here a long time. You have extended family here.
I do. I'm having lunch with some of my extended family later on. I certainly am.
Can you give us a sense of what it's been like to, tell us a little bit about the India you have seen firsthand over the years?
I just think the change, it was wonderful listening to Prime Minister Modi last night. I thought he gave a brilliant speech. And, you know, I just want to check whether you were paying attention. How many more biochemical toilets are there now on Indian trains?
3,746.
I know, it's 360,000. It's and I think the progress I've seen, the change is quite amazing. And you know, India was already an amazing country, but I think that it's going places now, and the growth rates are astonishing. The ambition is amazing. I think all we need now is to complete that free trade deal that I started. I mean, it was good. We've done a lot, but there's a lot more to do, and it's a fantastic story. The Indian story today is a really wonderful story.
I will come back to the free trade deal, but firstly, with so much strife around the world, so much going on, I think one of the questions that is top of the mind of a lot of folks here, I want to come to you with first. Why don't you comb your hair?
Now, SK, you were very kind. You gave me advance notice of this impertinent question last night, and I've taken the trouble. I was shaving in the Imperial Hotel this morning, and I out of love and respect for India and for the Economic Times, I'm going to, for the first time in history, I'm going to comb my hair in front of you. There you go. I hope you consider that an improvement, SK.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're witnessing
it's the best I can do.
A historic
there
moment.
You go. You cannot say I'm not willing to oblige you for the sake of respect.
An important moment in the history of British-India ties. Mr. Johnson combing his hair for us. That is fabulous. Boris, speaking of friendships between countries, etc., you know, the spending on defense appears to have become a great fault line between Europe and long-standing, strong partner, the United States. The blame game is big. Trump is very fond of telling European allies that, you know, you're not footing enough of the bill for NATO and for protection. Defense spending is now going up. How do you see this whole?
You've got to be realistic, SK, about the so-called special relationship between the UK and the United States. I mean, the United States is the proudest invention of England, right? I mean, I was 250 years ago, a bunch of exclusively British or British-descended people signed the Declaration of Independence. It's a British invention, no question about it. But they're independent and have been for 250 years. We have rows. It took them 2 years to enter the Second World War. We burned down the White House. I mean, obviously before the Second World War. And this is a fractious relationship. I actually think it's in very good health at the moment. And NATO is in very good health. NATO is, as you rightly say just now, NATO is being better funded than ever before. I think partly as a result of the criticisms that Trump has rightly made of other NATO members on defense spending. I mean, I think we're going to be increasing our spending, the other NATO powers, by about $1.5 trillion, something like that, over the next 10 years, and that's a lot more money going into defense, and it needs to go into defense. You know, the elephant in the room is that there's a disagreement. You know, we weren't consulted about this war in Iran, right? And I honestly think that was a mistake. And I think, I honestly think that if I'd been Prime Minister when that thing kicked off, it would not have happened. Because, you know, if you remember, this is the third Gulf War. The first two Gulf Wars, the US and the UK were absolutely shoulder to shoulder. And there was even a joint cabinet with Margaret Thatcher and Bush, George H.W. Bush, and, you know, and Tony Blair and the younger Bush absolutely coordinated their efforts. There was no coordination, there was no understanding. As far as I can make out, there was no warning, mainly because the British embassy in Washington was exploding with this whole Mandelson nonsense. If you remember Peter Mandelson. And I think it was a fiasco, because someone should have interrogated the United States, if not President Trump, his planners, the Pentagon. What is the objective of this war? And we are your number one ally, right? We're your feeder Socrates. We're your loyal hench person. What do you want us to do to help you achieve your objectives, and what are those objectives? And by the way, what are you going to do if they close the Straits of Hormuz? Because the UK used to be quite heavily involved in that area, as you may remember. And people from the Gulf know very well. And so I think it was, you know, and we've got very good intelligence agencies. I really think we could have averted an obvious trap. I don't know what the UK was doing then. I wasn't in power, obviously, tragically. You know, I think it was a mistake. But why weren't our security services briefing the government that the US is about to walk into a terrible trap? What I don't understand it. However, we are where we are, and the mistake has been made, and the Straits of, you know, we've got the problem with the, you know, that ship has sailed, as they say. Though obviously not through the Straits of Hormuz, because you know, we have serious obstacles. I think that, to your point, SK, about the US, the UK, and Europe, I think it's time to be grown up and recognize that, look, America is the team captain, right? It may not be a popular point of view, but I'm just going to put it out there. All human institutions need a leader. India, in my opinion, and I hope I can say this without seeming to intervene in Indian domestic affairs, I think India is going through a very good period under very strong and stable leadership. I think that's a good thing. But the world needs leadership too. And for better or worse, America is the hegemon. And I'd frankly much rather have America as the hegemon than anybody else. Apart from the UK, obviously, but that, you know, that's a long time ago, and that ship has sailed too.
That's kind of in the past.
It is the past, and it's not going to happen.
It didn't happen.
So I'd rather, given where we are, I'd rather have America than China. You know, putting it out there, okay? Shoot me, but that's my view. Now, given where we are, people who love America and want to help America have got to think what we can do to get the straits open, help America out of the cul-de-sac. That's what we've got to do. And I think probably that goes for India too. And I appreciate that it's very difficult right now for India. It's difficult for the whole world. It's a very, very tough position to be in. But we've got to find a deal with Iran, difficult though that will be, and brutal negotiators though they are. We've got to do that. And by the way, we've got to find alternative solutions. We've got to build pipelines, you know, from Fujairah or wherever. We've got to sort it out. We've got to have a logistical alternative to the Straits of Hormuz. And yeah, I think what I would have said had I been in office and had I been, you will not change. It was totally deranged to think that you could change the regime in Iran from the air. Did we learn nothing from 2003? You know, why have we done this again? Really, anyway, too late. Change has got to come from within Iran. The Iranians are a great people. They're a wonderful people, and they need to be encouraged to change. And that's the way this thing has got to go. But the way to do it is by sticking together. And that means the US, the UK, India, consulting each other, concerting our plans, working out how to get the world out of this mess, get the price of oil down, get the ships moving. That's what needs to happen now. And, you know, I think enough schadenfreude about the mistake that President Trump has evidently made. There's no point in that. By the way, it's not a bad idea to be tough on Iran, okay? I mean, I think in principle, it's a good idea to stop them getting a nuclear weapon, right? And in principle, it's a good idea to stop them sponsoring terrorism across the whole of the Middle East and around the world. That's a great thing to do. And by the way, I don't much like a regime that kills women for not wearing the right headgear, okay? So I would love to see regime change in Iran. I'm just not convinced we've gone about it the right way. And, you know, in all humility, I think that I think the UK could have played a stronger role in trying to stop this mistake from happening. But we're now we've gone down the cul-de-sac, we now need to back out.
You said countries should consult each other and jointly formulate strategies. Is President Trump a consultative sort of a person, and is he likely to change?
Yeah, look, I think he is, yes. Donald Trump is a deeply consultative type of person. I mean, honestly, I've been shocked. I've been lying comatose in hotels in Miami when he's rung me up and asked my opinion on something. And so I'm sure that Prime Minister Modi knows this too. He loves to hear from his friends and to get advice. So I think that we should have done more. I really regret it.
And where do you see it going? I mean, where do you see the stalemate over Iran going? Well, like, what's the outlook for that particular conflict over the next few months?
Honestly, I wish I could offer you an optimistic view about negotiating with Iran. Has anybody here negotiated with the Iranians? Anybody? I have. It's miserable. They are absolute. The IRGC you're basically talking to are tossers, if I can use that word, in the hallowed precincts of the Economic Times World Leaders Forum. They are, once they think they've got you, they've got something over you. Once they've got something that you're stuck, and they will continue to weaponize whatever advantage they have. And I wish I could say I was optimistic about negotiation. That's why I think that other logistical solutions, supporting the Iranian opposition, I don't think that they're going to give America an easy ride over the Straits of Hormuz. Does anybody here think they're going to do that after they got their leadership blown up? It seems unlikely to me. And, I think what only thing that's going to work is concerted action by the rest of the world, concerted pressure on Iran to do a deal. We need to go back to something like the JCPOA that we had, I'm afraid. That's the reality. They need to agree, no more ballistic stuff, no more supporting the Houthis and Hezbollah and all the rest of it, no more supporting terror around the region, and no nuclear program. That's what they need to agree. And they can be made to do it. But I think that the trust levels with the United States are very low right now. That's a sad thing.
Well, speaking of hegemons and superpowers and the world order in that sense, one of the gaps I think the world feels today is that of Europe, or rather the narrative of Europe as a continent in retreat. Not a great leader in emerging technologies, not very strong economic growth. This whole idea that, Europe should be able to sustain a lifestyle that affords people, 4-day work weeks and so on, while things are far more severe elsewhere. How do you look at this? Is this a problem, or is it an?
Yes, it is a problem, and it's not. We have an aging population in Europe, and we don't work anything like hard enough to support that population. I think it was last year, I was giving some lectures, and I spent a long time in Texas. And I took my family out that so much time, and we all went swimming in this wonderful river, the Guadalupe River, and we camped and all this stuff. And there was nobody there. The sun was out. There was nobody there for day after day. In Britain, the place would have been swarming with people bunking off work. The Americans have 2 weeks holiday a year, and they work unbelievably hard. I mean, that's why they have per capita GDP of $95,000 a year, whatever it is. They are an amazing country, and Europe does not have that work ethic, I'm afraid, right now. And we spend far too much on welfare, and yeah, I mean, we need to import into Europe some of that American zap. There's absolutely no question, and into the UK.
And given the kind of values that Europe has historically promoted around the world and has generally been a force for good in terms of, I mean, not speaking of the colonial period, but in terms of the institutions they have promoted democracy.
Yeah, I think you could argue that post-war, the rules-based international system that Europeans have by and large promoted, and I think human rights, the rule of law, they've been very important. Yeah, I think that's right. And they need to be protected. But look, I mean, there's a lot of polemic at the moment from the Americans about Europe. And I love America. I was born in America. Fantastic country.
And you were a citizen.
Yeah, I was. It was very expensive to be in America. They tax you. I was mayor of London. They taxed me on the sale of my primary residence in London. So I gave up being American. But there's a certain amount of anti-European polemic that is unfair, right? I've agreed with you about welfare. I've agreed with you about work ethic, but if you say that, I see some stuff about crime in London, right? And why London is unsafe and all this sort of nonsense. London is safe as houses. Now, I was mayor of London, and I got it as you kindly pointed out, and it was unbelievably safe on London. I haven't seen the recent statistics, but when I was mayor of London, I mean, you were 5 times more likely to be murdered in New York than you are in London. And that's still, by the way, that's still more or less true. So this is just the negative propaganda that you would expect from a New York realtor who wants to do down his #1 global competitor. That's what's going on. London is a very, very safe city, a wonderful city, and good times are ahead for the UK. I think one of the problems we've got is that we have all these inventions, like AI started in the UK. A lot of things started in the UK, and then we keep selling it to the Americans. That's the mistake.
Andy Burnham, like you, former mayor of Manchester, is now in 10 Downing Street. What would you say are the top issues he needs to contend with at this point?
He needs to. Well, he's doing a lot of things that I did actually, like the £2. That's the reason I got a huge majority in 2019 was because we did some things like a £2 bus pass, which is a very good idea because it helps people. I mean, Prime Minister Modi's speech was brilliant because he talked about retail issues. He talked about improving the transport network. And honestly, though, I reckon, I don't know whether that speech was widely broadcast in India last night. Was it? Did everybody? I really hope it was, because people would have seen that some of the things the government of India is doing that really make life better. And a £2 bus ticket, which is what we did, what Burnham has now done again, that's useful for people. It gets people on low incomes to their place of work, right? It drives the economy. It's a leveler. It helps level up. It's a great thing to do. So I think Burnham's done the right thing there. But he's pathetic on lots of other things. Absolutely pathetic. So, his big challenge is illegal migration coming across the channel in the boats, which is absolutely tragic. These gangs taking people across in children's plastic blow-up swimming pools and stuff like that. It's absolutely appalling. And That needs to end. He could end it. What he needs to do is get back to the Rwanda scheme, brilliant, humane scheme devised by me, which was to send them, as soon as they arrive in Kent, straight to Rwanda, right? What could be nicer? Twin Kent with Kigali, and you'd immediately bust the business model of the gangs. And as soon as they knew that was going to happen, by the way, the numbers started to go down. Unfortunately, the Labour Party is very squeamish about that kind of thing, doesn't like, it's basically pro-free movement. And that's a disaster. And the Brits have totally moved beyond that. So they need to get back to the Rwanda. They need to get rid of the European Convention on Human Rights insofar as that's blocking that. They need to get back to the Rwanda scheme, stop the boats. Need to cut the welfare bill. I talked about that just now. You know, how, the spending on mental health care in the UK has more or less doubled since the pandemic. Okay? I mean, how gloomy can we be? Is that really right? Do you notice people in Britain being substantially gloomier under a Labour government? Maybe they are, but I mean, you know, it's not right. It's many tens of billions. It's too much. We should be cutting it. Cut welfare and then cut taxes. Taxes are far too high. Stimulate growth, stimulate investment. That's what he needs to do. Just for starters. Anyway.
Speaking of, I mean, we spoke about Trump's mistakes. I want to come to perhaps some of the mistakes.
About whose mistakes?
We spoke about President Trump's mistakes.
Yeah, I'm not going to get in too much trouble for saying all that. I mean, I was saying it in a loving way, right? But I cannot see how this. We weren't consulted. That's my objection. We weren't consulted.
No, I want to.
Or if we were consulted, we didn't say the right thing. I mean, I don't know. I wasn't there.
But from Trump's mistakes, I want to discuss perhaps some of the mistakes you have made during your time in office.
Well, that won't take long. What really? So we've got another 22 minutes to fill.
The British electorate, when polled
yes, go on.
in January this year, 58% of the folks said Brexit was a mistake. Are they having buyer's remorse about listening to you?
Well, don't forget that 49% said they were against it. So that's a very small shift, in my view, and it's probably not within statistical margin of error. But people said they were against it before a majority of the polls were in fact against coming out of the EU before miraculously the British people voted to come out.
If you want to stick to the same poll, 30% said it was a good idea, 58% said it was a bad idea. This is a YouGov poll.
Okay. So, okay, fine. Thanks. Well, look, I certainly don't think it was a bad idea, and I don't think, just looking at some of the things that have happened, we certainly wouldn't be able to stop the small boats if we stayed within the EU, right? Because there's no way you could send people to Rwanda under the common asylum and immigration policies that we have in the EU. No way, right? So, and on immigration, actually, the numbers on legal immigration, the numbers are now coming right down because we're out of the EU. In the EU, there's no way you can legally stop the free movement of 450 million people who might want to come to the UK. That they have a legal right to do it under basic EU principles. All right, that's a lot of people by our standards. So we have that freedom. I think I've mentioned many times that we were able, thanks to Brexit freedoms, to vaccinate whatever you may think about vaccination. Actually, we had a vaccine that was very largely made in India, the AstraZeneca vaccine. And I had it myself. I had the Indian version of the AstraZeneca vaccine, so thank you very much. It seemed to work. No, seriously, thank you. And we were able to roll that out literally months faster than the other EU countries, or than the EU, because we were then out. Because they delayed. Their European Medicines Agency, for some reason, took weeks and weeks and weeks longer to give approval to these vaccines, Moderna, Pfizer, AstraZeneca, all of them. And so by the middle of 2021, when I was Prime Minister, we'd vaccinated, you're talking about mistakes I made as Prime Minister, I honestly can't think of any. We'd vaccinated 45% of the entire UK population and about 100% of those over 80. And the comparable figures in the EU were about 10%. That was because we had a Brexit freedom, right? And so, you know, I'm not going to hear any nonsense about that. And if you think the British people are going to vote to go back into the EU, you are out of your tiny mind. I promise, not that you're saying you've got a tiny mind, but, you know, of course you don't. But, you know, it is just not going to, it's never, to go back into the EU, you have to vote to give up, well, your control of your borders, your laws, all that again, your currency, because under EU rules, you have to join the euro. We'd have to give up the pound sterling. Plus, we'd give up hundreds of millions of pounds a week. And, you know, it's just not going to happen. And, you know, and just to anticipate your next question, SK, no, go on, ask it anyway, but I bet I know what it is.
No, keep going.
Is it about the 100, how much we get back a week? Let me tell you.
It's about what you promised.
It's what I promised. Well, okay, we over-delivered. Thank you. We teed each other up there. Look, we put on the side of that famous bus, I don't know whether you saw it, but there was a big red bus that went around the UK promising that we would restore £350 million a week. Actually, that was an underestimate. If you look at how much we were going to be asked to pay by 2020, it was more like £450 million a week, okay, or gross. But, you know, even a huge amount net. You know, half of 225 million pounds a week. It's a lot of money. You can build a hospital a week for 225 million pounds, right? So, and that money did go into the NHS. We put a huge amount. We started a huge program of hospital building. But you can't waste that money. It's a mistake to waste it. And I think, as I say, you know, too much is going on welfare spending that can be trimmed.
In April this year, you went to the front lines of the war in Ukraine. You have since spoken out about the impact of drone warfare.
Yes.
How are drones changing the? I mean, firstly, take us through your thoughts on the war and where it's going, and especially how are drones changing the equations on the ground?
Yeah, well, SK, it's a brilliant point. I mean, I don't know whether anybody has been to Ukraine or talked to the Ukrainians about what's happened, or to the Russians, but the drone thing is really terrifying. You know, you can be you've zapped, blipped at any time. And, you know, miles from the front line. And so it has changed the face of war. And it's very scary. And those Ukrainians are heroic. But the thing I would like to convey to a great Indian audience is, look, do not believe the propaganda that Putin is fated to win this war. He is not. I would put it to you that he is fated to lose this war. He's fated to lose it because he's going up against the desire of the Ukrainian people to be independent and to be free. And when the people want to be free, it's just about the most powerful human emotion, apart from religion, in our breasts, right? But people want their country to be free. There's nothing that's going to stop them. British Empire discovered that. Right? Nothing. And they will be free. What needs to happen is that war needs to end. And, you know, if you ask me what I think should happen, I think that the Ukrainians should be given the maximum possible help. And yeah, I think that it would be a good thing if the Tomahawks were given to them to take out the Russian bases that are used to bomb Ukrainian civilians. I think that the 140 billion of Putin's cash that's sitting there in a Brussels bank account. That should go to Ukraine. Those are some of the things that I think we should stop the trade in illegal, in sanctioned oil that's going on around the world, in Putin's oil. That would make a huge difference. Get it over. Get it over. And I don't think it's that far. Honestly, sometimes I don't think it's that far from being over. The only guy who can end this war is Vladimir Putin. Trump can't do it. Zelensky can't do it. Only Putin can do it. And he's losing 30,000 people a month. His economy is in real difficulties. He needs to be persuaded that it's in his interests to get it done. And that's the difficult thing. And at the moment, he's worried that what will happen is that the minute he stops, the recriminations will begin. And everybody will say, Vladimirovich, why did you kill 1.1 million Russians, or whatever the number now is, far more than have died in any conflict since the Second World War? Why have you done this when we've achieved so little? He's terrified of that. That's why he won't stop. And somehow we need to flip the switch in his brain to make him realize that going on is worse than stopping. I mean, going on is worse than stopping because he's just going to keep losing people to no avail. A snail, literally a snail, would go twice as fast to the Polish border as the Russian advance in the last year, right? They're never going to do it. And the Ukrainians are never going to surrender their country. So the faster, the more pressure what I'm trying to make is, the more pressure we can put on Putin. And I appreciate that India is in a particular position on this. But the more pressure we can put on Putin, the faster we can do it, the better. But, I remember once, I had this conversation with your great Prime Minister many times. And I was once saying to Her late Majesty the Queen of England, how difficult it was to persuade our Indian friends, firmly to come down against Russia. And she said, well, she was quick. It was very shortly before she died, and she said, quick as a flash, "Oh yes, I remember in 1952 when I was talking to Prime Minister Nehru, and he said, Your Majesty, India will always basically be on the side of Russia. Some things never change, they just are," he said. I don't know whether you agree with that analysis, but I was very struck by that. And I think we have to go with the historical reality. But I would just urge you to, I don't think this thing is going to end without more pressure on Russia. And honestly, what I would love to have seen is, India doing more. This is our fault, right? Like so many other things. But I would like to have seen more military cooperation between India and the UK, and India and the United States. I think that would have been much more sensible. But it's happening now.
What were your interactions with the late Her Majesty the Queen like? Did she think you were funny?
God, I was always too nervous to ask. I never asked. It didn't occur to ask her. I think. I don't know. I think. Look, you've got to understand that she's seen a lot of us, right? I'm very honoured to be here, by the way, at this World Leaders Forum. But you could have picked a wide range of former UK prime ministers. There's a ready supply. Okay, we're making them the whole time.
We did a poll.
We're exporting more former UK prime ministers than almost anything else at the moment. So look, she was very, very gracious. Very, well, I think what it was like talking to your favorite grandmother, right? And literally, you could tell her, you could make appalling confessions that you would never tell your parents. You know what I mean? And she was so understanding because she really, I mean, it was like a priest. She'd heard it all before, and she'd heard worse. So she was wonderful. She was very kind, and what was so noticeable about her was she always saw above what was so important. She always saw beyond the politics to what was the long-term interest of the country. And she was very, very good at keeping you focused on that. She was a wonderful, wonderful person.
I want to talk about the role of humor. I mean, you've been a communicator your whole life, and then you became a politician, and and you use humor a lot. And we see, I mean, it has helped you in your political career. We see someone like President Trump, who's also really entertaining in his own way. Not if you're on the receiving end of his policies, but otherwise. President Zelensky used to be a comedian. I mean, now of course he's a very serious wartime president, but that's a separate matter. Can you talk us through? Like, I'm struck by this comment of one of your rivals. I don't know if it was Ken Livingstone during your mayoral races for London. They expressed great exasperation. They said that you talk to the average person, average voter, and they say, "Well, I'm going to vote for Boris because he's funny."
I know. I know. Well, I know they should have. Well, they should have been given a chance to do so again. That was a great mistake. Anyway, I think humor is obviously a defense mechanism, isn't it? First, it's people tell jokes in order to protect themselves, is one thing. The other thing I would say, so that's a common psychological trait, I think. But I think that the reason I defend the use of humor in politics is because you've got to keep people paying attention. Yeah, I mean, otherwise, I don't want. This has been an unusually attentive audience, by the way. I want to thank you very much. But I think you've been amazing, considering how early it is in the morning, and But quite a lot of people, politics they want to design it. So you have to keep some jokes going, and keep entertaining them, and Ronald Reagan told a lot of jokes. Winston Churchill told a lot of jokes. Who else? It's not a disgraceful thing to do. Just to try to. It's like a McVitie's digestive biscuit with chocolate on top, right? You eat the chocolate on the top to make the rest of the biscuit worth eating. Yeah. In my experience, anyway.
Want to talk about the India-UK FTA, which you promised in 2022 when you were Prime Minister and visited Ahmedabad along with Prime Minister Modi. You said we're trying to get it done by Diwali that year. Of course.
Well, you didn't say which Diwali. No, we were very careful.
Very clear. Sorry for the misunderstanding.
No.
But it's
no.
It's now
I always keep my promises. Well, yes. Yeah. Look, I'm thrilled that it's happened, and it's a great deal. And if I've achieved nothing else in my life, my friends, I have cut the tariffs, or I have helped to persuade the brilliant, doughty, remorseless Indian negotiators to cut the tariffs with the exorbitant 150% tariffs on Scotch whiskey to 75%, and going down further to 40% in the next few years. So that's a big deal for my relatives, by the way, because the one thing they wanted me to do, really, I think probably the only reason they allowed their beautiful daughter to marry me was in the hope. Because you see them going through duty free with these huge clinking carrier bags of Johnny Walker, and now it's, or whatever it is, and now it's. I hope. I think the cut came in July, but it's going to be substantially cheaper. By the way, amongst the many benefits of Brexit, I should say, is that trade with India has gone up by how much? 186% since Brexit, and it's literally going up like that the whole time. And I'm very, very proud of that. And you know, we're seeing we've got wonderful, amazing investments in the UK from India. Every Brit is proud of Jaguar Land Rover. We think they're amazing vehicles, but they're Indian owned. And actually the recovery of JLR, as everybody knows, is very, very largely an Indian triumph. I have a motorbike at home, a Birmingham small arms motorbike, which is made in this country. And, you know, there's more and more of this stuff happening, which is very exciting. And, you know, if you ask me, where does it need to go? You know, I said earlier on that I think India has got an incredible future. It really has, because you're a democracy and you're a free country. It's an amazing, amazing place. And you've got so many amazing natural advantages. Listening to what Prime Minister Modi was saying last night about, obviously, something he used a phrase I hadn't heard, but the licensing or something, the license Raj. Did I catch that correctly? Well, I mean, come on. What about, yes, that's right, the PLP, which I thought was the Parliamentary Labour Party, but it turns out it means something else. Why is it so difficult for a UK lawyer to, you know, what are you frightened of the UK lawyers? You know, nothing wrong with them. I think there is, all I'm saying is we benefit massively in our country from Indian investment and Indian talent. You know, I had a cabinet that contained more people of Indian origin than ever before, I'm proud to say. Not all of whom supported me for quite long enough, but never mind. You know, there's a massive future, but there are some things we could fix. Law, accountancy, supermarkets. We fix supermarkets. I'm not convinced that Tesco could set up here very easily. You know, maybe you don't want Tesco, fine, okay, but you know, there's more to be done, and it would promote growth and jobs in both countries, believe me.
I have two more questions for you. One is, can you pick your favorite English football team?
No, but I haven't got a clue about football. And my sons, I have lots of sons, they back, some of them back Newcastle for reasons I simply don't understand, which I think is now owned by Saudi Arabia, but there you go. My wife backs Arsenal, God knows why. I have one son who backs Manchester United. I think when I was a kid in London, I remember being a fan of George Best, but I can see by the blank looks on your faces that means nothing to you. George Best was a big star in when I was growing up, but I wasn't good with. I wasn't, you know, I was quite good at rugby. I was good with anything that involved just bursts of aggression. That I could do, but controlling a ball with your feet and passing it to somebody else on your own side. I could pass it to the opposition, but trying to pass, that was very difficult, I found. Are you good at football?
Not at all.
Can I ask you, just to see whether did I ask you how many biochemical toilets there were on Indian trains?
You did. I gave a very specific and wrong answer.
Oh, yeah.
Already.
Okay, how much has the punctuality of the train service in the Delhi region improved?
99%.
Correct. Isn't that fantastic? 99.9, I think. Yes, I think you're underestimating it. 99, but that's a fantastic. I mean, it was a brilliant speech because people need to know this retail stuff. They need to know the way the government. You know, I used to say that I'd made the tube trains run 30% faster, which was basically true. You know, you jiggle around with the statistics because of the signaling things we did, or that we cut the murder rate by 50%, which was also true. But you know, people need to know that. And I thought, you know, you don't hear, honestly, you don't hear speeches like that enough in the UK. You know, politicians should be constantly telling the voters what on earth they're doing. That's my view.
Boris, you revived interest in Greek poetry single-handedly worldwide by doing a recital of Iliad during an interview
Do you think
sometime
that's
back
true?
in the
I
US.
don't
No,
know.
greatly. I mean, I think it's got millions and upon millions of views
Really?
online. Could I request you to reprise the performance, maybe with any ancient language of your liking?
I wish I could. I wish I could. Rishi once gave me the Bhagavad Gita, and I looked at it, but unfortunately, it wasn't good enough. I I could do. I've done. I've done the Iliad, right? Have you? Who knows the Aeneid by Virgil? The Latin epic.
Anybody speaks Latin here? I guess
There's a
not.
bunch. Listen, I bet there's some lawyers here. Hands up, who's a lawyer? Okay, no, maybe not so many. Okay.
There are many lawyers, but
Okay,
well,
okay,
we have a top lawyer.
I'm rusty. I'm rusty on all this. The Aeneid of Virgil is a wonderful poem about the foundation of Rome, which is the beginning of so much. Okay, Armaverum qui cano, Troiae qui primus saboris, Italiam farto, profugus Lavinia qui venit litera multelet terris iactatus et alto. Li superum saevae memorem unionis orbiram. Multa coget bello pastus dum conderet urbem. Infereque Deus latio genus undi Latinum. Albani qui patres at qualtae moenia Romae. Musa mihi causas memora quo numini lyso quid vidolens regina deum tot volvere casus tantum. Hang on, how's it go? Insignem pietati virum tanadere labores impurit tantine animis caelestibus irae. I could go on, but I'm rusty. And I probably ought not to. Urbs antiqua fuit, Tiri tenueri coloni, Carthago, Italiam contra, Tiberina qui longa ostia, dives opum. Dives opum. Well, it means dives opum. Anyway, I could go. I'm rusty. Give me more notice, and I'll give you 100 lines. But dives opum. Anyway, who was following it?
We understood
It's a
everything.
great poem. Bellis Crespe. I can't remember the rest of it. Anyway, it's a great poem. It's about the foundation of Rome, and I obviously need to go back and brush it up. Next time. If there is a next time, I'll give you. But I've done the Iliad. Maybe I'll go and learn the Odyssey.
Do you want to do 2 lines of Iliad?
The Iliad. Okay. Min in Aedithea, Theleia Dio Achilleos, Ulomanen, Hemuria Caius Algia, Theke, Polastithimus Psucasa perhaps in Hero own, Artusta Heloria, Teuci Cunesin Oio Noisita Passi, the Ostit Leto Bule. Exhude ta protan dieste teneris anti atredes in axandron kai dios achileos tis terras foetheon eridixion ike macestai letus kai dios quios hoga basilei colothes nus on anatron orsic again on conto de laoi hunicaton crucein etemes in aritera atredes hoga elthi thoas eminas account Lus somenos tithagatra feron teperese pone schematagonicus in hecibul apollos cruceon escaped licito pantasacaius Atred Adam listidio cosmetrilone, Atredeti ialo, Eucnamin is a human min theoi, Doyen Olympia domete contes, Ec per sai pria moia, Polin eudoicadicestai, Hide de moi lucite philen caagla decthai poina, had zomonoidios on hecibul and Apollona. And I can generally go on for a long time with this. So you don't want to, but that's the beginning of that's. I don't think that's as old as the Bhagavad Gita, but it's a very old poem. And by the way, just I'll end with this thought. Has many of its cultural origins in Indian poetry, ancient Indian poetry, and in Sanskrit. If you look at it, a lot of the stories are the same, and a lot of the ideas are the same. I don't know quite what that tells us, but it probably tells us we should stick together. We should stick together. And I really think the lesson of the current discontents, I think, is that when you look at Iran, you look at the problems the world has got, I think they're all soluble. I even think Gaza is soluble, by the way. We didn't even cover that. But they depend on the democracies, the great democracies of the world, whose interests are so similar, sticking together. That's my strong advice. Thank you very much. I better head off now. Thank you.
We're going to send you a good English translation of the Bhagavad Gita across.
Yeah, my former mother-in-law could definitely do it all, but I can't.
A real pleasure, ladies and gentlemen. A big round of applause.
Thank you.
Boris Johnson.
Thank you.
The old balance of power may be giving way, but the next one is still being negotiated. Mr. Johnson, thank you for joining us, and SK, thank you for leading that conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, another warm round of applause for former Prime Minister Boris Johnson.
Now, talking of balance of power, a changing balance of power does not remain confined to diplomacy. It also reshapes trade, investment, and the roots on which the global economy depends. Ladies and gentlemen, our next conversation turns to the networks that keep global trade moving. Now, for years, supply chains were designed, above all, for efficiency. Move goods faster, reduce costs, and remove friction.
Now, that calculation has become much more complicated. Resilience, visibility, and the ability to respond when routes, markets, and trading relationships change matter just as much. And for India, that creates an opportunity that goes beyond moving more goods. It's about becoming more deeply embedded in the global networks through which trade itself moves.
Now, fewer businesses have a closer view of those networks than DP World. Its operations span ports, terminals, freight forwarding, logistics, and digital infrastructure connecting them.
Our next guest has spent more than 2 decades helping build that evolution and today leads the company globally. The conversation is titled Trade, Connectivity and Supply Chains, Rewiring the Global Economy.
In conversation with ET's Dilasha Seth, ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome onto the stage Group Chief Executive Officer of DP World, Yuvraj Narayan. Welcome, Mr. Narayan. Over to you, Dilasha.
It's a pleasure having you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So let's dive right in. I'd like to start with global trade. So global trade has weathered one disruption after another, right? It started with COVID, the Russia-Ukraine war, then we had now the West Asia war. So how do you view as one of the largest port operators, how has the global trade or the world trade witnessed a shift? Do you think there's a fundamental change there, or do you believe that only the systems are becoming more resilient?
I think, at the very outside, the good news is global trade is growing. It certainly is disrupted. And there are lots of factors. As you said, it started with COVID. What COVID essentially did was it brought about the significance of the supply chain. Everybody used to talk infrastructure, but they used to talk either of an airport or a port or roads. The importance of having all these multimodal pieces of infrastructure connected came out during the COVID crisis. The second thing that happened with COVID was people began to realize that the sheer length of the supply chain, global supply chain, was a big risk. The longer the chain, the more countries involved, how those countries act or react to a given situation can impact the reliability and the resilience of supply chains. And then, of course, last but not the least, the fact that there was over dependence on a single location for procurement. And when, for instance, China shut down, it became so apparent that they needed to have dealt with this risk before. So all these things are playing out as we speak. Uh, the length of the supply chain, the over dependence, the imbalance of global trade, east to west, the impact of climate. The longer the supply chain, the more carbon emissions as a result of all the transportation assets. So what you're dealing with is all these things at the same time. And the trends that are emerging are reasonably clear. So there is some diversification of your supply base away from China. And we have seen recent things like in Vietnam, in Malaysia, in Thailand, in India, places in Africa, Latin America. And the second significant thing that is happening is how do you reduce the supply chain, the length of the supply chain. So what we are seeing is a gradual shift from the main trade route being east-west is more north-south. New concepts like nearshoring. So you can see what's happening in Mexico, you can see what's happening in the Dominican Republic. And all this is to shorten the supply chain. China has been doing this for a very long time. In the last decade, the only people who we saw who wanted to build infrastructure and manufacturing capacity in LATAM and in Africa were actually Chinese. Everywhere we went, we had only Chinese competition. Nobody else was there. So China had made this decision more than a decade ago to manufacture for the world outside from China. The rest of the world is only catching up right now. And so all these trends are playing out. You suddenly see now very relevant talk about the Northern Transit Corridor, which is now navigable since the ice is melted in the Arctic for 9 months in the year. In a few years' time, will be navigable 12 months in the year. The normal east-west trade route, the Malacca Straits, Suez Canal into the Med, to Europe, is 23,000 kilometers. The Arctic route, 11,000. And the Arctic route, if kept green or blue in terms of fossil fuels, you can imagine the amount of carbon emissions you'll be able to solve. So these are all changes that are already underway. They're going to take time. You cannot bring about change of this nature in a great hurry. It takes a decade for things to change. But this change has been ongoing now for the last 5 years.
Where do you think India fits into this picture?
See, whenever people are looking for diversification of manufacturing, I mean, India has to come right on top of most lists. Because it is a huge market, the fastest growing large economy in the world. There are reforms that they have made in recent times. It's a digitized economy. And because there is a huge market here, the opportunity to scale production for other parts of the world is significant. So you can imagine that you have a 4 to 5 billion population within close distance of a manufacturing location is a huge positive. And this is a moment in time. I think these changes will begin to take shape in the next 4 to 5 years. And this is a moment that India must seize.
And DP World made significant investment announcements into India last year. about $5 billion. And you also opened an office in Gift City. So going forward, firstly, how is that panning out? And secondly, where exactly do you see opportunities in India?
So, DP World has a very simple philosophy. We are a global end-to-end supply chain solution provider. We work across the supply chain, across all aspects of the supply chain. Our philosophy basically is first we connect countries from within, and then we connect those countries with the rest of the world. So we operate in more than 80 different countries in the world, doing exactly this very same thing. India is a huge market, and there's a strong focus on developing infrastructure. So we have 6 port concessions in India, and one which is under construction, which will become available in Kandla next year. There is another big port opportunity, which is going to come in Maharashtra, I believe later this year. DP World will be a keen participant in that process. We are a big investor in rail. For container handling, we're the second largest container rail operator in India already. We have a 60% market share on coastal shipping in India. And of course, when it comes to road, when it comes to systems, when it comes to technology. So for us, India is a very key market. And we will continue to invest to connect India from within. And at the same time, we're making a lot of effort to connect Indian businesses with our global network. So opening up the Bharat Mart to help Indian companies sell product into markets where DP World has presence in the supply chain in other parts of the world. So yes, we are very bullish about India, and we will be investing significantly.
That's great to know. From amongst all the crises that you've seen recently, is the current West Asia crisis one of the biggest challenges in recent time that the trading world is seeing or facing?
Well, certainly, we have a big asset in DP World in Jebel Ali, which essentially has been shut down since the crisis happened, or is not functioning in the same way. It's functioning at roughly 10%. And that too because we are using the ports on the other side of the Strait of Hormuz to serve through rail connectivity, etc. I think it is not just the impact. So it's one of our many, many assets. And so DP World business still continues to be strong because of our diversification in other parts of the world. This is a big asset, and I think it would have a 10% impact on our overall capacity on a global basis. But we have found alternate routes to continue to serve the community within the UAE. But our ability to serve global supply chain obviously stands impaired because of the situation around the Strait of Hormuz.
Right. So yeah, I'd like to talk about the current geopolitical crisis that started earlier this year. So DP World had to make some very quick decisions at the peak of the crisis in March. And basically to keep trade moving, you rerouted cargo, adapted to logistics networks, brought in road and rail networks, right? So just wanted if you could give a glimpse into the UAE's activation of eastern ports and the swift redesign of supply chain that ensured there was sustained movement of goods.
So, fortunately, these ports already existed on the eastern side in terms of Fujairah and Khor Fakkan, but they were not in use. So obviously, when this crisis happened, we took immediate steps. We moved our people and our equipment from Jebel Ali into Khorfakan and Fujairah. We could only move mobile equipment. And of course, we moved 200 engineers and operators, and we assisted both the ports to start functioning again. But as I said, that till today, it's roughly about 10% of what Jebel Ali used to do. And therefore, the impact of Jebel Ali shutting down is more global than it's local. So local, everything is working in terms of us being able to make sure that there's enough product coming in to sustain life, all essential commodities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where we deployed our vessels as well as our people, and we moved them to locations from where we could continue to get goods in. And we recently announced that we would be expanding the capacity of those ports in Fujairah by another 2.5 million TEUs to ensure that we could serve the communities within the UAE better if there was to be another crisis.
Right. So will that compensate for Jebel Ali? But can you tell more also about the road and the rail networks? I think you have recently, after the crisis, obviously, you you have a network of 3,000 trucks, right? In your supply chain. Can you tell more about how are you using road and
So essentially, we opened and started operating new corridors. One from Oman and the other from Saudi Arabia and Jeddah, using road to connect. Obviously, that was a little more work needed to be done to get alignment. These are different countries, so you have to get your customs situations aligned. They have issues around transportation, which truck, which number plate, which country's number plate, which driver, nationality, visas. So all those things had to be worked out to make these corridors effective. But as I said, so we have capacity in Jeddah, and we negotiated capacity in Oman as well to create these alternate corridors to deal with the current situation.
And what broader lessons should nations draw when redesigning their trade corridors or supply chains in an era of recurring disruption as yet?
Nations should do everything to avoid the disruption, the kind of what we are witnessing today. It is about having good relations. It is about passage. It is about airspace. And now it has become about maritime boundaries. So if you start weaponizing all these things, then basically your ability to, if everybody decides to block what they can block, nothing will flow through. And this is what we should all work towards trying to avoid and hope that global leadership will prevent this from happening.
Right. You also mentioned about emerging corridors, right? And we have India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, which is IMEC, which is being talked about as the future of trade. So from a private sector perspective, what do governments need to do, and what should companies like DP World bring to the table to make these corridors?
So no matter which way you work the corridor, you will have a DP World presence. So it's a corridor starting from India. We have a very significant presence. If it happens to go through the Middle East, then we have a presence in. We will have a presence in Oman. We will be in the UAE. We have a presence in Saudi Arabia. We have presence across Africa. We have a presence in Iraq. So whichever way you go, We have capability on land, sea, and air, and we have a presence everywhere. So, whichever way a corridor is determined, and this will keep changing. So that you must have alternates, not the whole corridor, but pieces of that corridor. You can have trouble every now and then. So you need to have alternate capability, and I think DP World has a huge role to play to make sure that these corridors remain flexible and agile.
Right. Um, so building resilient supply chains comes with its own set of challenges, especially for import-dependent economies, because the cost rises simply, right? And uh, how can they work around it? And where do you see currently shipping and freight rates going from here?
So essentially, if you just go back and look at what every CEO of a shipping company was saying in 24, they said 25 freight rates will collapse. Then they said in 26 freight rates will collapse. And they have all had declared record profits. This is the price of the disruption. So if you close out the Red Sea, everybody is going around the Cape of Good Hope. It just costs 3 times more. So who do you think pays for it? The ultimate consumer will pay for it. So it's ridden with inflation. Freight rates will go up. And what was supposed to have freight rates should have been going down because there was excessive capacity in shipping. There is no longer excessive capacity because that is the amount of all that has been absorbed and more as a result of the disruption. So what used to take a 12-day cycle has now become a 30-day cycle. So as long as there is disruption, there will be a shortage of capacity on every piece of infrastructure that makes up the global supply chain. Everything will become more and more expensive.
Uh, will we see more solutions like DP World's cargo war insurance that you launched earlier this year for companies to manage geopolitical uncertainty? That could help.
See, we on our part uh, do everything we can to facilitate people from being able to navigate. If some customer comes to us and says, look, we have an insurance problem, we're not being able to buy insurance, we put insurance into place. But that doesn't necessarily solve the problem. Because just because I have a life insurance doesn't mean I'm going to go and hang myself or jump into a snake pit. And this is the problem you're facing today. When safety of navigation around two major waterways in the world gets impaired, insurance doesn't solve the problem.
But then what exactly can help? I mean, what can you do more?
Make peace. It's not very complicated.
Right. But that, like, you can't do. That's for
Well,
countries.
we can every now and then urge global leadership to shape up.
Right. Now coming to India and the UAE. India's manufacturing scale and UAE's position as a global trade and logistics hub offer significant complementarities. How can this partnership contribute to stronger trade connectivity?
I think it's a phenomenally strong partnership, not just from today but traditionally. And I think the Indo-UAE trade today is about $100 million, and in the next 10 years, in the next 5 years, it's going to double by 2030. So, and it has been growing very, very significantly. So India's manufacturing capability, market size, and UAE's connectivity was a perfect match. And I think I do believe that the connectivity will restore in due course, simply because it is too much to bear. You cannot have the Strait of Hormuz and the Red Sea blocked for extended period of time. It has to open, and the hope is it opens on the way it should open. It should not be forced. It should be negotiated, and it should. Otherwise, global energy prices, global the cost of everything, we haven't seen anything yet.
Right. Great. It was great speaking with you, Mr. Yuvraj. Had a wonderful time, got great insights, and wish you the very best as you continue taking on new challenges every day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, obviously, trade is visible in goods, but the real work lies in everything that gets them there. Mr. Narayan, thank you very much for joining us. Dilasha, thank you for leading that conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to move on to the next part of our program.
But before we do that, here's a quick reminder for all of you. Simultaneously, Hindi and English translations are available for the conversation that's coming up ahead. Headsets can be collected from the counter at the back of this room, but please remember to please return them back once the upcoming session concludes.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, our next conversation brings us back to India and the increasingly competitive race between the states of India for investment, industry, and jobs.
Madhya Pradesh has long had geography on its side, sitting quite literally at the heart of the country. Now, the opportunity is to turn that location into a larger economic advantage through stronger infrastructure, new industry, and investment across the state.
Leading that effort is our next guest with a focus on converting investment intent into projects on ground and widening the geography of growth within Madhya Pradesh.
Our next conversation is titled MP Unlocking the Heart of India. In conversation with the associate editor at the Economic Times, Deep Shikha Sikarwar, ladies and gentlemen, with a generous round of applause, let's welcome onto the stage the Honorable Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, Dr. Mohan Yadav. We request you to please stay with us while we have the Honorable Chief Minister making his way to the venue. Ladies and gentlemen, with a warm round of applause, let's welcome the Honorable Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh, Dr. Mohan Yadav, in conversation with Deep Shikha Sikarwar.
Good morning, everyone. We heard about geopolitics and what's happening around the world in a very interesting session in the morning. And now we're returning to what's happening in the country itself. We have with us Dr. Mohan Yadav, who is the Chief Minister of Madhya Pradesh. Madhya Pradesh, which was tagged as a Bimaru state some decades ago, is now boasting of double-digit growth. A state which is the only state in the country to have cheetah in the Kuno National Park, an animal which symbolizes sprint and grit. Madhya Pradesh is now aiming to become a developed state, and Chief Minister has set this ambitious goal. So we are going to ask him a few questions on how he's planning to get to this goal. For those who do not understand Hindi, there are headsets available. So please take those headsets. मोहन जी, आपने एक लक्ष्य तय किया है जब आपने कार्यभार संभाला मध्य प्रदेश में, मध्य प्रदेश को एक विकसित राज्य बनाएंगे। तो प्रधानमंत्री का एक लक्ष्य है कि विकसित भारत बनाना है देश को। तो इस लक्ष्य की तरफ 2 साल में आपने क्या नीतियों में बदलाव किया है और इस गोल को हम किस तरह से अचीव कर पाएंगे?
देखिए, ये अभी का समय स्वर्णिम समय है। यशस्वी प्रधानमंत्री के नेतृत्व में सभी राज्यों को समान रूप से आगे बढ़ने के लिए अपने अपने संसाधनों के साथ आगे बढ़ने का मौका है। हमारे राज्य की पहचान मोटे तौर पर कृषि आधारित राज्य की थी, लेकिन जो हमारे अपने नैसर्गिक जिनका एडवांटेज हमारे राज्य को है, उस पे हमने गौर किया और उसी का परिणाम निकला कि आज लगभग हमारे राज्य के अंदर हमने 2.5 साल के अंदर जो जीआईएस कराई थी, जीआईएस के अलावा रीजनल इंडस्ट्री कॉन्क्लेव जो पूरे देश के बाकी राज्यों ने अपनाई है। हमारे लिए आमतौर पर एक इंडस्ट्री कॉन्क्लेव बड़े शहर इंदौर में होती थी, बाद में फिर 2-1 साल बाद होती थी। हमने इस क्रम को बदला और कई कारण से मैंने अभी आगे चर्चा में आएंगे अपने, कई कानूनों को समाप्त किया, पर्याप्त लैंड बैंक डेवलप किया, बिजली से लेकर के हमारी पॉलिसियों तक में बदलाव किया ताकि बिजली, पानी, सड़क ये तो है ही, लेकिन अगर हम निवेशकों को उनकी जरूरतों के हिसाब से सरलीकृत पारदर्शी व्यवस्था में व्यापार व्यवसाय के लिए प्रेरित करेंगे तो उसका लाभ मिलेगा। उसका परिणाम है कि आज की स्थिति में मध्य प्रदेश में 2.5 साल के अंदर ही लगभग 10 लाख करोड़ से ज्यादा निवेशकों का पैसा न केवल इंडस्ट्री के रूप में लगा है, बल्कि कई इंडस्ट्रियां चालू भी हो।
10 लाख करोड़ का निवेश, और आप कह रहे हैं कि ये जमीनी स्तर पर इसमें काम चालू है, सिर्फ एमओयूज नहीं।
जी।
आपका जो बैकग्राउंड है, आप डॉक्टर नहीं बने, आपने प्री मेडिकल टेस्ट क्लियर किया लेकिन नहीं किया, और आपने अपने जब आप छात्र थे आपने व्यवसाय शुरू किया रेस्टोरेंट का। तो आप एक व्यवसायी बैकग्राउंड से रहे हैं, आपको पता है व्यवसायियों की क्या समस्याएं होती हैं जमीनी स्तर पर, ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस। तो आपके कार्यकाल में आपने ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस जो है, जो समस्याएं या जो चुनौतियां आपकी रही एक व्यवसायी के बतौर, आपका ये जो बैकड्रॉप था उसमें आपने अपने कार्यकाल में उसमें कितना परिवर्तन करने की कोशिश की?
देखिए, हमने बहुत सारे प्रकार से बदलाव किया है। उदाहरण के लिए हमारे यहाँ हमने पर्याप्त लैंड बैंक खड़ा किया, जिसके कारण से हमारी इंडस्ट्री की जो संभावना रहेगी वो इजी उसमें उसका निवेश करने के मौका मिले। और खास करके नियम पारदर्शिता के बलबूते पर जैसे हमने अपने जन विश्वास अधिनियम 2 एक्ट लाए, 900 से ज्यादा पुराने कानून जो व्यापार व्यवसाय को रोकते थे उनको हमने समाप्त किया। 2700 से ज्यादा अनुपालन के जो बिना बात के सर्कुलर थे जो काम रोकते थे उनको भी खत्म किया। और दूसरा एक बड़ा कारण ये रहा कि हर सेक्टर में, जैसे आप मान लो आपको लैंड आवंटन करना, तो पहले 59 दिन में जमीन देते थे, अब हम उनको 29 दिन के अंदर जमीन देंगे। बल्कि अभी मैं बीते समय विदेश में डावोस में जब था, तो डावोस में ही हमने सेम डे जमीन भू आवंटन करने का काम डावोस में कर दिया। और अभी मैं जब गया था तो उन्होंने वहां भूमि पूजन करा लिया। दूसरा, जितने निवेशकों से जब बात होती, कमिटमेंट होता है कि आपको हम 30%, 20%, जो भी हमको उनको जो सब्सिडी देना है, तो ये 2 साल, 10 साल, 20 साल तक नहीं मिलती थी। हमने कहा नहीं, ये बीते महीने तक की मिलना चाहिए। तो 5,500 करोड़ से ज्यादा की हमारे निवेशकों की जो उनके हक की अपनी शासन की प्रतिबद्धता थी। डीबीटी डायरेक्ट बीच में कोई नहीं, डीबीटी से उनके खाते में पैसे पहुंचाने का काम हमारी सरकार के माध्यम से हुआ। जब ये जो हम करते हैं तो इससे विश्वास बनता है, और केवल अपने राज्य में नहीं, हम अपने राज्य में भी अपने रीजनल इंडस्ट्री कॉन्क्लेव करते हुए कि केवल एक बड़े शहर, 2 शहर के बजाय हमारे लिए अलग अलग सब्जेक्ट वाइज इंडस्ट्रियल बेल्ट खड़े किए। जैसे हमारा कॉटन का बेस मालवा है, तो माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी से बीते साल उनके जन्मदिवस के अवसर पर देश का सबसे बड़ा पीएम मित्र पार्क का भूमि पूजन हमने कराया, और मुझे खुशी है देश का सबसे बड़ा पीएम मित्र पार्क का भूमि पूजन हुआ और सेम डे सारे प्लाट बिक गए। ये एकमात्र हमारे राज्य का ये एक पूरे देश को आदर्श उदाहरण बना है कि जहां हम निवेशकों का इतना विश्वास अर्जित कर रहे हैं कि अभी तो पार्क का भूमि पूजन हो रहा है, उसके पहले लोग लैंड आवंटन करा करके वो समान रूप से इंडस्ट्रिया भी बनना चालू हो गई। ये प्रतिबद्धता है काम करने की और काम के प्रति समर्पण है।
So multiple laws have been scrapped for ease of doing business. Multiple procedures have been simplified. And the most important factor which impacts investment, which is acquisition of land, that has been brought down to 29 days. So if investors are looking at Madhya Pradesh, the land acquisition has been simplified to a large extent. मोहन जी, मध्य प्रदेश की अगर अर्थव्यवस्था देखें तो विकास की नजर से इंदौर या मालवा का क्षेत्र जो है या भोपाल है, वहां पर ग्रोथ जो है हमेशा बेहतर रही है बहुत सारे अन्य जिलों से। तो लेकिन जब आपने एक विकसित मध्य प्रदेश का एक लक्ष्य अपने सामने रखा है, तो उसमें हर जिला, पूरे मध्य प्रदेश को योगदान करना पड़ेगा राज्य के विकास के लिए। तो आपने क्या ब्लूप्रिंट एक तैयार किया है कि पूरे राज्य का विकास हो और उसी स्तर पर विकास हो?
देखिए, ये बात सही है कि मध्य प्रदेश भौगोलिक दृष्टि से राजस्थान के बाद सबसे बड़ा राज्य है, और भौगोलिक रूप से राज्य बड़ा होने के कारण से हर एक क्षेत्र की अलग अलग अनुकूलता भी है। जैसे कॉटन वाला मैंने मालवा का बेल्ट बताया, लेकिन ये आज के जमाने में जो हमारी ये जो तमाम प्रकार की एनर्जी सेक्टर की बात करेंगे, तो एनर्जी में हमारी जहाँ माइनिंग है वहाँ कोल आधारित इंडस्ट्रियों के लिए हमने अपने कोल थर्मल पावर और माइनिंग के सेक्टर में प्रेरित करते हुए सिंगरौली, सीधी, शहडोल, रीवा और अभी बीते समय टीएमटी सरिया वाले को 3,000 करोड़ का इंडस्ट्री का उनको शहडोल के अंदर बड़ा कारखाना, उन्होंने कहा कि अगर मैं ये कारखाना रायपुर में लगाता तो 4 साल में चालू होता, अगर मैं किसी और जगह चलाता तो किसी हालत में कम से कम 3 साल लगते, लेकिन ये मध्य प्रदेश से जो 1.5 साल के अंदर मेरे को सारी सुविधा दे दी और वो वहां हम चालू करने की स्थिति में पहुंच गए। और केवल यहाँ नहीं, अभी हम मोहासा बावी पार्क का बताएं, एनर्जी का हमने एनर्जी पार्क कर दिया जिसमें पंप स्टोरेज के बैटरी स्टोरेज की दृष्टि से है। तो वहां हमने 200 एकड़ से शुरू किया था, 200 खत्म हो गया, फिर 200 और देना पड़ा, 400 हो गया, फिर 400 एकड़ दूसरी दी और 400 800 भी चली गई। आज की स्थिति में 1200 एकड़ से ज्यादा बड़ा पार्क। तो ये 1.5 साल के अंदर इतना जल्दी रिस्पांस आना, ये निवेशकों का और सरकार की प्रतिबद्धता का परिणाम है। अभी हम अपने ग्वालियर सेक्टर में जाएंगे, आप तो ग्वालियर से आते हैं। टेलीकॉम सेक्टर के माध्यम से अभी हमारा ग्वालियर का माननीय सिंधिया जी, पहली बार देश के अंदर क्या दुनिया में ऐसा हो रहा है कि केंद्र सरकार और राज्य सरकार मिलकर एमओयू कर रही है, और वो अपनी पॉलिसी का लाभ दिलाएंगे, सरकार अपनी ढंग से लाभ देगी, और हम दोनों मिलकर के टेलीकॉम सेक्टर का ये अपने आप में अनूठा टेलीकॉम का हमारा बड़ा सेक्टर डेवलप हो रहा है। और वहीं डिफेंस का भी बीते समय डिफेंस का हमारा ये झांसी से लगा बेल्ट मध्य प्रदेश का, बीते समय हमने अडानी डिफेंस की दृष्टि से उनको बड़े, शायद मुझे लगता है 4,000 करोड़ से बड़ा एक हमने उनकी एक इंडस्ट्री का भूमि पूजन भी किया है। और ये यह नहीं, आप इसके अलावा भी हमारे सरकार के माध्यम से जो भी नए सेक्टर है, आप केवल एजुकेशन, हेल्थ, फूड, एनर्जी, हर सेक्टर में हमारी अपनी जो 24 पॉलिसियां आई है, और ये आमतौर पर वर्षों लग जाते हैं एक पॉलिसी लाने के लिए। 24 पॉलिसियां हम 2 साल से कम समय में ला करके सरलीकृत रूप से आपको हमारे पास आने की जरूरत नहीं। हमारा कहना, निवेशक अपने अवसरों के लिए दौड़ लगाए, बाकी सरकार अपने आप उसकी मदद करेगी, घर जाकर के उसकी ताकत देने का काम करेगी। इंडस्ट्री अपने पैरों पे खड़ी हो, हमारा प्रयास है।
So growth is not restricted to just the two major centers, but plans are in place to ensure an all-round development for all the cities. सर, अगर आपसे मध्य प्रदेश को हमेशा एक कृषि राज्य के रूप में देखा जाता रहा, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग में और सर्विसेज में आप मध्य प्रदेश को आगे लाने के लिए, आपने बताया बहुत सारी नीतियों में परिवर्तन किया गया है, लेकिन मैन्युफैक्चरिंग क्षेत्र आप किस तरह से और आगे लाना चाहते हैं, और सर्विसेज क्षेत्र के लिए आप क्या कुछ कर रहे हैं?
देखिए, दोनों तरह से हम बढ़ रहे हैं। हमारे राज्य के अंदर 340 से ज्यादा इंडस्ट्रियल बेल्ट हम डेवलप कर रहे हैं, जहां 22 हमारे पास जंक्शन है, 8 एयरपोर्ट हैं। सरलीकृत रूप से अगर 1 लाख एकड़ से ज्यादा लैंड बैंक हमारे पास है, बिजली सरप्लस है, मैन पावर भी हमारे पास पर्याप्त है। बल्कि हमारे यहाँ तो रोजगार आधारित अगर कोई इंडस्ट्री लगाएगा तो लेबर को भी 5,000 रुपया पर लेबर हम सरकार की ओर से अपना अनुदान जोड़ रहे हैं इंडस्ट्री वालों के लिए। फैक्ट्री आपकी डेवलपमेंट के, फैक्ट्री का जो उत्पादन आपको करना है, लेकिन रोजगार आधारित अगर आप काम कर रहे हो तो रोजगार आधारित काम करने में बिजली, पानी, बाकी डेवलपमेंट के दूसरे ब्याज के वो सब्सिडी है ही, लेकिन अगर लेबर में भी छूट दे रहे हैं तो ये अपने आप में इंडस्ट्री का बहुत बड़ा सपोर्ट मिल जाता है। मुझे इस बात की प्रसन्नता है कि मैं बीते समय कोयम्बटूर गया था, और कॉटन इंडस्ट्रियों को जब हमने ये बात कही तो बड़े पैमाने पे वहां से भी आई। अब तो ये जो टेलीकॉम सेक्टर में भी जब हमने सिंधिया जी के साथ रोड शो मुंबई में भी किया, दिल्ली में भी किया, बड़े पैमाने पे इसमें अब बहुत अच्छे से लोग जुड़ रहे हैं। इसके अलावा प्लग एंड प्ले के माध्यम से भी हम बहुत सारी प्रकार की व्यवस्थाओं में सहयोग भी कर रहे हैं। जैसे आपने कहा कि सेवाओं के क्षेत्र की बात अगर करते हैं तो हर सेक्टर में हमारी सब्सिडी बहुत आकर्षक है, और सरकार की प्रतिबद्धता, वचनबद्धता भी। सरकार जो कह रही है वो निर्धारित समय में पैसा हाथ में दे देती है। मैं एक इंडस्ट्री के मालिक का नाम नहीं बताऊंगा, लेकिन पूना वाले हैं, उनने हमारे यहाँ 6 साल पहले कोई इन्वेस्टमेंट किया था। अभी मैं बीच में पूना में हम रोड शो करने गए तो वो मिलने केवल धन्यवाद देने आए कि मेरे 7 साल पुराने 800 करोड़ थे। मुझे लगा कि वो तो भूल गए, सरकार तो बोलती रहती है, लेकिन खाते में देखा तो हमारा दिमाग काम नहीं करा कि कोई सरकार ऐसा करती कि बिना बोले खाते में पैसा डाल दे। बड़ा ये केवल मध्य प्रदेश कर सकता है। मुझे इस बात की प्रसन्नता है कि आज के समय में हमने अपनी वचनबद्धता कि हमारी पहले किसी की सरकार, सब सरकारें सरकार होती है, एक समय कांग्रेस की सरकार भी थी, हमने कहा एक बिजनेस में कांग्रेस बीजेपी के अलावा भी वचनबद्धता का काम होना चाहिए। मध्य प्रदेश सरकार तो आज है, इसलिए जो बात कहे वो उसको अपने बातों में खरा उतरना चाहिए।
So commitment to support the industry through a direct benefit transfer, your support and subsidy reaches directly to your accounts, and that is the state government's commitment. So telecom क्षेत्र की आपने बात की, जो आप सेंटर बना रहे हैं, तो वहां पर किस तरह का कमिटमेंट आया है? कितनी कंपनीज और किस तरह की कंपनीज आ रही हैं?
देखिए, लगभग 5,500 करोड़ का तो यहाँ दिल्ली से हमको निवेश मिला था। इसके अलावा जब मुंबई गए तो वहां भी तकरीबन इसके आसपास के हमको ऑफर मिले हैं। मैं मान के चलता हूँ कि हमारा अपना अभी तो जो हमने बात कही है, ये दोनों मिलाएं तो लगभग 10,000 करोड़ से ज्यादा का निवेश, वो भी तब जब अभी हमने भूमि पूजन भी नहीं किया है। अभी तो हम भूमि पूजन करके जब मैदान में उतरेंगे उसके बाद की आप कल्पना कर सकते हो। लेकिन इसकी तरफ आप हमारा कमिटमेंट भी देखिए, राज्य सरकार ने भी हमारी जो डेवलप किए हुए प्लाट, जिसकी हमको लागत करीबन 400 रुपए फीट से ऊपर पड़ी, अगर हम 1 रुपए फीट में इंडस्ट्री वालों को दे रहे हैं तो ये बहुत बड़ा कमिटमेंट है हमारा, और एक तरह से समर्पण है कि हाँ, हम काम को काम की तरह लेना चाहते हैं। इसी प्रकार से बाकी चीजों के लिए भी जो जो जिस प्रकार की आवश्यकता है वो सब हम करने के लिए तैयार हैं।
यादव जी, आपने ऊर्जा क्षेत्र के बारे में बताया कि उसमें बहुत काम हो रहा है, खासतौर से ग्रीन एनर्जी के क्षेत्र में। आप उसमें विस्तार से बताएंगे कि कितना निवेश ऊर्जा क्षेत्र में आ रहा है और आपने नीतिगत क्या परिवर्तन किए हैं?
जैसे हमारे पास आज की स्थिति में लगभग 31 गीगावाट का हमारे पास एनर्जी का सेक्टर है, उसमें 30% हरित ऊर्जा है और ये हम 50% तक ले जाने वाले हैं। और इसमें भी पंप स्टोरेज से लगा करके विंड है, थर्मल, सोलर है, सब सेक्टर में लगातार प्रमोट कर रहे हैं। तो ये एक अपने आप में बड़ा आकर्षण भी है। अभी आपके आने के पहले ही मैं स्विट्जरलैंड वालों से ही बात कर रहा था, वो सारे यही होंगे। उन्होंने कहा कि अब हमको ये बैठे ही हैं, अब आप जहां भी कोई बात निकलेगी, अभी एनर्जी का सेक्टर हो, हेल्थ सेक्टर हो या टेलीकॉम की आपने बात कही हो, माइनिंग का सेक्टर भी हमारा बहुत अच्छा है, जिसपे हम अपने राज्य के अंदर देश का एकमात्र राज्य ऐसा है जिसके यहाँ पर सारे अधिकतम सीमेंट कारखाने हमारे यहाँ पर है। अब हमारे यहाँ तो सोना भी मिल रहा है, हीरा एकमात्र राज्य कहीं मिल रहा है तो मध्य प्रदेश में मिल रहा है। तो कुल मिलाकर के हर सेक्टर में, लेकिन अब इससे आगे बढ़ के एविएशन सेक्टर में भी हम बहुत तेजी से आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। केवल आपकी जानकारी के लिए बता दूं कि अंग्रेजों के समय 4 एयरपोर्ट बने थे हमारे यहाँ पर। वो 1930 में बना हमारा ग्वालियर का, उसके बाद 35 में बना जबलपुर का, बाद में 40 में बना भोपाल का, 48 में बना इंदौर का। इंदौर का करीबन उसके आसपास बना जब देश आजाद हुआ, लेकिन शुरुआत पहले हो गई थी। बाद में जनता पार्टी के टाइम पे केवल एक एयरपोर्ट बना था 1978 में। बाद के समय में कांग्रेस ने कुछ नहीं किया। अभी हमारी सरकार बनने के बाद, मोदी जी के बाद, आज की स्थिति में 5 एयरपोर्ट हमारे बन के तैयार हो रहे हैं। ये हमारे काम करने का तरीका है। और 5 क्या नए एमओयू हो गए, तो 5-5 10 आपके ग्वालियर का भी नया जो आपने देखा टर्मिनल, पूरा बदलाव आया है। तो ये 360 बदलाव आ रहा है। ये परमात्मा की दया भी और हमारे काम करने का, तो इसलिए अब हम स्पेस टेक्नोलॉजी पे भी काम कर रहे हैं। स्पेस की हमारी नीति निकाली है, ड्रोन नीति है, एआईसीटी हम बना रहे हैं। हर प्रकार के संभावना वाले क्षेत्र में हम काम कर रहे हैं। ये अलग बात है कि हमारे अपने राज्य से कोई समुद्र की सीमा नहीं लगती है, लेकिन हमारे यहाँ का निर्यात 7 समंदर पार जाता है, ये हमको मालूम है, उस पर हम काम कर रहे हैं।
प्रधानमंत्री ने, आपने निर्यात की बात कही, प्रधानमंत्री ने सभी राज्यों को ये संदेश दिया था कि हम बहुत सारे फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट साइन कर रहे हैं और राज्यों को ये कोशिश करनी चाहिए, नीतियां इस स्तर पे बनानी चाहिए कि उनका उद्योग जो है, उनके यहाँ पे जो व्यवसाय है, वो इसका पूरा फायदा उठा सकें ये फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट्स का। तो निर्यात क्षेत्र के लिए आप किस तरह का आपने फ्रेमवर्क बनाया है?
हमने कहा कि हमारे यहाँ निर्यात आधारित आज की स्थिति में 55 जिलों में से लगभग 37 जिलों से निर्यात हो रहा है और हम प्रयास कर रहे हैं कि 1-1.5 साल में 55 जिलों से निर्यात होने लगे। ये हमारी पूरी गंभीरता के साथ जिला स्तर की मॉनिटरिंग चल रही है। 10 हमारे कमिश्नरी हेडक्वार्टर हैं और राज्य स्तर पे हम पर्याप्त मॉनिटरिंग कर रहे हैं और इसी के लिए परिणाम निकल रहा है कि कई कारणों से मध्य प्रदेश बहुत तेज संभावना वाला अपना निर्यात आज की स्थिति में लगभग 88,000 करोड़ का निवेश ईयरली हमारे यहाँ से हो रहा मध्य प्रदेश से, और ये बहुत तेज गति से आगे बढ़ने वाला।
उनके लिए भी, निर्यातकों के लिए कोई सपोर्ट या सब्सिडी
लगातार हम इसी प्रकार से काम कर रहे हैं। अभी अभी लेटेस्ट हमारा मछली उत्पादन को लेकर के अरब के बड़े एक निवेशक के साथ एमओयू हुआ है। तो हर सेक्टर में कोई सेक्टर छूटता नहीं। अब तो बंगाल के लोग भी हमारे यहाँ के जलाशय की मछलियां पसंद करते हैं। हमारे लिए एक नए प्रकार का समय चल रहा है। आमतौर पर हम समुद्र के किनारे वाले अपने फूड पे खुद निर्भर रहते थे, लेकिन बदलते समय में हमारे यहाँ जल रचना, तालाब, इतने बड़े बड़े जलाशय बन गए हैं जो हमको एक तरफ एनर्जी भी देते हैं, सिंचाई के लिए पानी भी देते हैं, लेकिन मछुआरे भाइयों को रोजगार भी देते हैं। हर सेक्टर में हम आगे बढ़ रहे हैं। दूध उत्पादन में भी देश के अंदर तीसरे दूध उत्पादक देश के राज्य में हम, हमारी गिनती आती है। हमने तय किया कि हम देश में नंबर 1 पे 2 साल के अंदर दूध का प्रोडक्शन करेंगे और उसी के बलबूते पर फूड इंडस्ट्री में भी बड़े पैमाने पर बहुत अच्छी संभावना पे हम लोग काम कर रहे हैं।
आपने कहा कि मध्य प्रदेश एक लैंडलॉक स्टेट है और ये एक बहुत बड़ी चुनौती थी निवेशकों के लिए, बहुत वर्षों तक रही है। जो दूसरे राज्य हैं, महाराष्ट्र, गुजरात, वहां पर निवेश ज्यादा आया, खासतौर से क्योंकि कोस्टल स्टेट्स थे। ये जो स्पर्धा है, आपको लगता है कि इन राज्यों के साथ इनके सामने मध्य प्रदेश जो है निवेशकों के लिए उतना आकर्षित बन पाएगा जो आप कोशिश कर रहे हैं?
देखिए, आप कभी मेरे दौरे देखना, तो मेरे दोस्त बाकी सरकार के मुख्यमंत्री भी हैं। वो एक तो अब केवल बताना चाहूंगा, जब मैं तमिलनाडु गया और वहां निवेशकों के बीच में बात की, तो वहां के अपोजिशन के नेता ने धरना दे दिया अपने मुख्यमंत्री के सामने कि तुम क्या कर रहे हो, मध्य प्रदेश वाले सब ले जा रहे हैं यहाँ से खींच करके, थोड़ा अपना भी चिंता पालो, अपनी हालत खराब हो रही है। और केवल वहां नहीं, बाकी कई राज्यों में तो मैं अधिकांश जगह ये बोलता हूँ कि आप यहाँ भी अपना काम करिए, हमारे यहाँ भी करिए। हम ये नहीं कहते कि आप बंद कर दो, हमारी पॉलिसी आकर्षक है, व्यवहार अच्छा है, लैंड बैंक पर्याप्त है, बाकी अनुकूलता है, संयोग से देश के मध्य में मध्य प्रदेश आता है, तो उत्तर दक्षिण पूर्व पश्चिम हर जगह जाने के लिए, माल को पहुंचाने के लिए प्राकृतिक अनुकूलता भी है। लेकिन हर एक जगह, लेकिन मैं एक आपके साथ इतना जरूर जोड़ना चाहूंगा, ये यशस्वी प्रधानमंत्री के नेतृत्व में वर्तमान का स्वर्णिम समय चल रहा माननीय नरेंद्र मोदी जी के समय, जब वो राज्यों को परस्पर स्वस्थ प्रतिस्पर्धा के लिए, कटुता के लिए नहीं, सब मिलकर के आगे बढ़े, ये अनुकूलता माननीय मोदी जी के कारण से हो रही है। हमने अपने जल के बंटवारे में भी बीते समय राजस्थान और मध्य प्रदेश का जल का बंटवारा, हमारा नदी जोड़ो अभियान में पार्वती काली सिंध चंबल योजना 20 साल से अटकी पड़ी थी, लेकिन थोड़ा सा पानी हमने थोड़ा ज्यादा दे दिया, ये बात सही, राजस्थान में पानी कम है, कोई बात नहीं, हमने आपस में बंटवारा कर लिया। और इसी आधार पर नदी जोड़ो अभियान का माननीय मोदी जी ने 50,000 करोड़ का हमको लाभ दिया, 15 जिले हमारे, 15 जिले उनके, पूरा बदलाव आएगा। उत्तर प्रदेश के साथ केन बेतवा नदी जोड़ो अभियान का लाभ मिल रहा है। तो जब डैम बन रहा तो पानी भी मिलेगा, सिंचाई का पानी भी मिलेगा, बिजली भी उत्पादित होगी, क्षेत्र भी समृद्ध होंगे, सब तरफ एक तरह से आर्थिक रूप से बदलाव आएगा। तो ये जो स्वस्थ प्रतिस्पर्धा में भी यही भाव है कि हर एक क्षेत्र, हर एक राज्य आपस में मिलजुल करके, हम सब मिलकर के देश की प्रगति के लिए अगर आगे बढ़ना चाहेंगे, तो हर एक राज्य की कुछ कुछ अलग विशेषताएं आपस में मिलकर के भी कर सकते।
So friendly competition with states and policies and changes to make the state more attractive in comparison to other states. That's the promise from the Chief Minister. मोहन जी, आपके कार्यकाल को 2 वर्ष हो गए हैं। सबसे बड़ी, अगर कहें कि सबसे ज्यादा चुनौतीपूर्ण आपको क्या कार्य लगा, सबसे बड़ी चुनौती क्या थी राज्य के लिए, और क्या आप उस चुनौती को पूरा कर पाए हैं? आप अपने कार्यकाल का असेसमेंट खुद कैसे करते?
अभी बड़ा कठिन प्रश्न कर दिया आपने, कहाँ का गाड़ी उतार दी पता नहीं चल रहा है एकदम से। एक राजनेता के सामने ये प्रश्न बड़ा ऐसा होता है, लेकिन कोई बात नहीं, मैं आपसे, हमने तो माननीय मोदी जी के नेतृत्व में विकास करना सीखा, और एक शब्द उनका बहुत अच्छा, आपदा में से अवसर। चुनौतियां हमेशा आती है, लेकिन चुनौतियां आपको मौके लेकर भी आती, उन मौके का आप सदुपयोग करिए। मुझे इस बात की प्रसन्नता है कि हमारे अपने राज्य के अंदर कृषि आधारित राज्य था, लेकिन कृषि आधारित राज्य होने के बाद में भी बहुत सारी संभावना थी। जैसे केवल एक उदाहरण देता हूँ, 1956 में मध्य प्रदेश बना, लेकिन जीआईएस जब भी होती थी तो भोपाल में कभी नहीं होती थी। हमने बीते समय भोपाल में जीआईएस करा करके, भोपाल राजधानी है, कई लोग तो पहली बार भोपाल आके देख रहे हैं, बड़ा अटपटा भी लगा, लेकिन आश्चर्य भी लगा कि भाई अगर राजधानी में जीआईएस नहीं होगी तो कहाँ होगी। और इसी प्रकार से हमारे राज्य के विभिन्न ऐसे अंचल है, आप ग्वालियर देखिए, जबलपुर, इंदौर, भोपाल, उज्जैन, हर एक सेक्टर में बहुत संभावना है, और हर एक जगह हमने अपने इंडस्ट्री कॉन्क्लेव की, और रीजनल इंडस्ट्री कॉन्क्लेव करने के कारण से रीवा, नर्मदापुरम, सीधी, सागर जैसे हमारे अधिकारी भी कह रहे थे कि आप कहाँ इंडस्ट्री कॉन्क्लेव कर रहे हो यहाँ पर, लेकिन बहुत सफलता के साथ पूरी हुई। तो ये जो हमको चुनौतियां थी, लेकिन इन चुनौतियों से बाहर भी आए। मुझे आज इस बात की प्रसन्नता कि सबसे तेज गति से जहां निवेशक आकर राज्य में काम कर रहे हैं, उन राज्यों में से मध्य प्रदेश नंबर 1 पे स्थिति में पहुंचा है, ये हमारे लिए आनंद की बात।
So going forward, अगले जो साल हैं, उनमें आपका जो प्लान है, वो क्या है? क्या कुछ है जो आप करना चाहते हैं आगे के कार्यकाल?
देखिए, माननीय मोदी जी ने ये काल को कहा है अमृत काल। अमृत काल मतलब जब देश की आजादी के 100 साल पूरे होंगे 1947 से 2047 तक। तो अमृत काल में हर एक राज्य अपनी अपनी वित्तीय ताकत कहाँ तक ले जाएगा, प्रति व्यक्ति आय कहाँ तक ले जाएगा, इस सब के टारगेट तय करके क्रमशः उस पर चरणबद्ध बढ़ने की आवश्यकता है। मुझे केवल 2 आंकड़े दे करके मैं अपनी बात को समझाना चाहूंगा। हमारी सरकार बनी भाजपा की जो कंटिन्यूएशन में आ रही वो लगभग 2002-3 से आ रही। यहाँ 1956 में मध्य प्रदेश बना कांग्रेस की सरकार में और 2002-3 तक केवल प्रति व्यक्ति आय 11,000 थी। और जब मैंने अपनी सरकार बनी तब आज की स्थिति में उस समय से लेकर के 1,37,000 रुपया प्रति व्यक्ति आय शिवराज जी के समय थी, माननीय कृषि मंत्री अभी जब है। और जब मैं अभी 2 साल के अंदर 1,67,000 रुपया प्रति व्यक्ति आय, ये हमारी 2 साल की ग्रोथ। और इसको जब 2047 तक जाएंगे हम प्रति व्यक्ति आय 22,50,000 रुपया प्रति व्यक्ति आय की मुकाम तक पहुंचाना चाहते हैं। ये टारगेट लेके हम चल, इस प्रकार से पूरी एक तरह से 360 करना चाहते हैं और ये बहुत असंभव नहीं है, योजनाबद्ध तरीके से चल रहे हैं। जैसे केवल बताना चाहूंगा कि आजादी के बाद से लगाकर 2002-3 तक केवल 5 मेडिकल कॉलेज हमारे राज्य में थे। आज की स्थिति में 39 मेडिकल कॉलेज हमारे हैं, जिसमें 15 मेडिकल कॉलेज तो मेरे टाइम के खोल दिए हैं। तो ये जो हो रहा है इसको देखना भी पड़ेगा और ये सबको अवसर देने की जरूरत। 3 गवर्नमेंट यूनिवर्सिटियां अभी हमने 2 साल के अंदर खोल दी। 52 यूनिवर्सिटियां हमारी प्राइवेट है। कुल मिलाकर के 73 यूनिवर्सिटियां हैं। एजुकेशन के से लगा करके हर सेक्टर के अंदर जो पर्याप्त ध्यान देना चाहिए वो सब करने का प्रयास कर।
हमारे पास समय बहुत ज्यादा नहीं है, लेकिन यहाँ पे जो निवेशक हैं, उनको आप कुछ संदेश देना चाहते हैं?
मैं इतना ही बोलना चाहूंगा कि मध्य प्रदेश का अपना एक ऐसा कल्चर है, एक बार जो मध्य प्रदेश आता है वो मध्य प्रदेश को कभी छोड़ता नहीं है, पक्का है। वो मध्य प्रदेश आपको बुला रहा, आइए मध्य प्रदेश के साथ बढ़िए, अपने व्यापार व्यवसाय को 4 गुना आगे तक करिए। अपनी तरफ से परमात्मा ने मौका दिया और सच में मैं निवेशकों का या उद्योगपतियों को इस भाव से देखता हूँ। हमने तो भगवान नहीं देखा है, लेकिन ये निवेशकों के माध्यम से भगवान आपको ताकत देता है, जिसके माध्यम से कई लोगों का भला आप कर सकते हैं।
On that note, ladies and gentlemen, that investors who create job and who contribute to the development, they are doing God's work. That's the message from Madhya Pradesh CM, Dr. Mohan Yadav. Thank you very much, Chief Minister, for joining us here.
So at the heart of India, Madhya Pradesh is a natural center of gravity, and the ambition is to turn that into economic pull. A big, big thank you, Honorable Chief Minister, for taking time out and being here. And thank you, Deep Shikha, for leading that conversation. Moving on. Now, Suresh, growth has one inconvenient habit.
That would be that it needs a power and a lot of it.
And a great deal of it.
And it's going to need reliable, affordable, and increasingly clean power.
Looking at that, now growth is becoming quite a demanding customer.
Which actually, Ritika, sounds just like the right cue for our next panel discussion.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, the global energy conversation has changed. Climate ambition remains urgent, but so do the price of power and security of supply.
And for India, those pressures converge at an exceptional scale. As demand grows, the task is to build an energy system that can power the economy reliably, remain affordable, and keep the transition moving.
That brings us to our very next conversation, the panel titled The Energy Order, Balancing Security, Affordability, and Sustainability.
Joining us are the Secretary of the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Mr. Santosh Kumar Sarangi, co-founder of the Suzlon Group, Girish Tanti, President and CEO of the nuclear business at Bajaj Energy, Sunita Kumar, and Country Director for India at the World Bank, Paul Prosi. Panelists, can we have you on stage?
Moderating the discussion is senior editor at the Economic Times, Anu Bhuti Vishnoi. Let's welcome them all with a big round of applause, please.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are privileged indeed to have a very stellar panel with us and to discuss an issue which is central to deliberations across economies, across countries. That is the clean energy order in shifting geopolitics. So, very, very warm welcome to all of you, first and foremost. Thank you so much for making time. So there was a time when renewable energy and clean energy was looked at a more, in a more narrow sectoral sense of things and more as an effort and measures towards renewable climate action targets to tackle climate change. But I think it's a different story altogether now. Recent geopolitical conflict from West Asia crisis to the Russia-Ukraine situation have appended the old playbook, and suddenly energy security is central to every country today, to every sovereign nation, especially some country like India with a young demography, with a growing economy, which is why we are discussing this subject today. I'd also like to remind yesterday itself, the Prime Minister in his address at the ET World Leaders Forum mentioned how development is now dependent on energy security. And energy security is simply not possible without clean energy today. So I will start straight off with the Secretary, Ministry of New and Renewable Energy, Mr. Sarangi, who is here with us. Sir, as we are wading still in choppy waters when we look at ongoing geopolitical conflict, what are the policy measures and prescriptions you have in mind or are still working on as you look to catapult this sector into another orbit?
Thanks, Anubhuti. In fact, in your introduction, you have mentioned about geopolitical order upending the normal business as usual functioning in many of the countries. And with the kind of import dependence which we have for petroleum and petroleum products, it's quite natural that India will be impacted. But I think we have weathered this particular volatility quite well. And that has to do with our ability to ramp up renewable energy installation in the last couple of years. So today we have more than 300 gigawatt of non-fossil fuel installations. We are well on track to achieve our 500 gigawatt non-fossil fuel installation by 2030. And I remember a recent article by Mr. Amitabh Kant, the former CEO of NITI Aayog, where he is suggesting that instead of 500 gigawatt, India should actually be aspiring for 1500 gigawatt of renewable energy by 2030. While that being quite ambitious, I agree with him that at some point of time, we need to put our focus back on converting this economy from being a petro state to an electro state. That would require behavioral change. That would require us to push supply side abilities in supplying the required number of EVs, induction cooking systems, home appliances where demand shifting can easily be done. So a combination of this will actually result in shifting India into an electro state, and that would bring about a lot of resilience in the economy, a lot of reduction in our import dependence.
Mr. Thanti, if I could go to you next. Now, as a market leader and somebody who's invested in this sector for such a long time, do you see the turbulence in the geopolitical order as an opportunity or is it a challenge?
Well, it's an opportunity, according to me. And as I said, I think, just picking up from where Sarangiji mentioned, I think India is very uniquely placed right now that on one side, we have set a very strong base over the last 10 years in building up our RE sector. both from a demand side, supply side, on both sides. And I think I tend to agree with sir also in terms of it's time to probably rethink our goals. We have put those ambitious goals. Prime Minister Modi has set out very clear and ambitious goals. But I think it's a time to kind of step them up. And it's an excellent opportunity for India, not only just to make sure that whatever gets built out from here, I mean, we've seen today, not just in India, but globally, almost 80% of all new energy that has got built out globally and in India has come from renewables. And this trend isn't going anywhere. And the electrification which is happening right now, purely with the demand that has come up, whether it's from AI, from EV, and general economic growth like countries like India, India is going to need power almost 5x of where we are by 2050. And a large portion of that will come from renewables. As a country, we are also very blessed. Although in the non-fossil fuel, in the fossil fuel area, we are kind of heavily dependent. Almost 75% of our oil is still kind of import dependency, 50% of gas. But in renewables, if we see today, we have just scratched the surface of the potential in our country. Both for solar, less than 10%, for wind, less than 5% of the resources we have captured yet. So excellent potential across. And the beautiful part of the other element that we have in renewables is that you are able to get this development in the grassroots. It's a distributed generation kind of design, which allows, as our Prime Minister says, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, renewable actually allows you to do that on ground because it brings development across the sector. So I think as a sector, we are very bullish and we see that now is the time for India to not just go green in a big way, but also be a great hub for rest of the world because world is looking at partners who can help them in the green energy transition.
Sunita, when we look at today's India, you have a sudden change in the lay of the land. The Shanti Act has been passed by the government of the day, and it opens up doors to private sector as well as foreign entrants. It opens up the whole nuclear energy sector in a very, very massive way for India. How do you see that mix in the total energy mix of India? And given supply chain uncertainties, how do you think that will pan out?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been fortunate to spend over 2 decades in both nuclear and renewable and conventional energy. So the Shanti Act really redefines the landscape for India. And by making the private sector be a key player and also allowing foreign direct investment, as you said. So it's a remarkable vision from the government of India to make this happen. We heard from the Prime Minister yesterday how opening up the defense sector to the private sector transformed the entire place. So by now becoming an exporter. So I think the vision is there even for India to be able to export its nuclear talent and technologies outside of India. But we also need to look at how do we make that happen. And part of that, I think, we have opportunities to be a global leader by not only rapidly expanding our nuclear capacity, but also the technology and the talent. And so we heard a lot about AI yesterday. AI can help us with that transformation. And so I think many things can happen, both in terms of trying to recruit talent, making India a talent hub, so that we are a magnet for folks with nuclear expertise, both in R&D and existing reactor designs to waste management, spent fuel, all of those things that are part of the entire nuclear supply chain, as well as the nuclear fuel cycle. So a lot of opportunity there. The government has, they continue to be very transparent and involving us. I've personally had a chance to participate in over 4 stakeholder sessions with the DAE, AERB, Niti Aayog, and others. So I think the sky is the limit to make nuclear part of that energy mix, which is so important. So it's not just renewables, it's also nuclear. It's all of the options that we have working together, and not as competitors, but in a collaborative way.
Paul, now you have worked on sustainable development across economies from China to Argentina to India now. Now, how do you look at the RE shift currently in India? And do you think it's happening in the kind of sustainable shift manner which you would like? I'd also like to add one other aspect to it. We also have a huge number of data centers and the like coming up, and there's a huge debate around the water and land stress that brings. How do you balance that?
Very good questions, and thank you so much for having me here, and thank you, Secretary, for all the work that we are doing together. And it could be not more timely for me sitting here because we have just signed one of the largest rooftop solar projects with the government of India and in the world, actually. So I'm very happy to be part of the thinking and helping the government pursuing its goals in terms of renewable energy. And I have to say, it's incredible because if you think about 55 gigawatts of clean energy being added over the last year, it is tremendous, and there are even more ambitious targets moving forward, and we are very happy to be part of it. So I think India is definitely on the right track. They are doing the right things. They're investing where they need to invest. We, as the World Bank, I think we will, in the coming years, move a little bit away from pure renewable financing because we believe that the private sector can do a lot of it, and a lot of focus will be on the grid, smart grid, on the integration, on battery storage, and on the manufacturing. I think our program in India is very much focused on private sector jobs, manufacturing and skills. And I think this is one of the sectors that will provide the most opportunities for India. So we need to think green energy beyond just, you mentioned already, beyond sustainable development. This is about growth, it's about jobs, it's about basically economic security. And I think all of this, this particular sector is well positioned. There's no country in the world where there will be a higher demand for energy over the next 10, I would say even 2 to 3 decades to get to Viksit Bharat in 2047. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of de-risking some of these investments that need to happen in some of these other sectors. I think that on the solar and on the wind, especially onshore wind, the private sector can take nowadays the risks. I think our program will have a more private sector focus on IFC. But when you look at the battery storage on the transmission lines, on the smart grids, AI integration, I think there's still a big role that the World Bank can play in de-risking the investments that are needed moving forward. And that's where we will focus our program on. Also to enable new energy forms to come into the grid. I think the grid is now probably the biggest constraint that we have in India and the full integration of the grid at the national level, but also to be smarter and basically make sure that we have lower losses and make more efficient use of energy. And we don't talk too much about it, but I think it is part of our program as well, is the issue of energy efficiency. We will not be able to get ourselves out of this curve without increasing the efficiency of current technology and so on. So we are working very much on electrification of transport systems, for example, in India, also with a goal to reduce some of the pollution that is happening, but also the efficiency of, for example, cooling devices. And it's a very interesting program that we have on the cooling devices because there's a humongous opportunity. And it is actually, funny enough, more with the Department of Industries, where we're looking into the manufacturing ecosystem, how we can help develop the manufacturing within India and made in India to help achieve that goal. And we have big programs as well on green hydrogen, where we have done some policy programs and so on. So a lot of investments are needed. And I think that's where, and I was very happy to hear the Prime Minister yesterday as well, saying we will welcome more investments coming in and we will make it easier, which is critical for the future of India. But if I compare to all of the countries that I worked in, let's say, and I was in China 15 years ago, I think India is in a unique position to foster that growth and to help green development. But don't forget, we need to invest in the skills. And that is another part that we will do beyond the financial investments, is to invest in the skills that are needed in a lot of these new sectors that are coming in, to see how we can make sure that the youth that is coming into the market will have the skills needed in these new technologies that are coming up. And that India, hopefully, that's the dream that we have, in like 5 years will not be just
supplying its own energy demand, but will become a big exporter of technology as well for the rest of the world.
Mr. Secretary, you mentioned the ambitious targets that we're looking at. So I have two questions there. How are we placed on our 2030 targets? It is 500 gigawatts. Plus, you already mentioned Mr. Khan's article, but you've also talked about a super grid like China, which we may need if we look at the NITI kind of prescriptions, 1800 gigawatts. So where are we on those timelines and targets?
As far as 500 gigawatt of non-fossil fuel installation by 2030 is concerned, we are well on track, but I would tend to agree that the challenges of transmission lines being ready to evacuate this power is one of the challenges which we are facing. And there is a requirement to bring in transmission lines much in ahead of the installation of renewable capacity. That's largely because in the older days, when a coal-based power plant was getting ready, the lag between the plant site work and its completion used to be about 5 to 6 years. And that used to be a sufficient enough time for the transmission line to be ready. Nowadays, transmission lines are taking anywhere between 3 to 5 years, whereas wind turbines, the solar modules are getting installed within a period of anywhere between 12 months to 18 months, at the most 24 months. But many of them are in a modular form now and have the capacity to be installed within a 1 year period. So reducing this time lag would require some degree of public funding of transmission. Until now, all our ISTS lines, interstate transmission system lines, have been done on a TBCB mode, where the upfront investment has been done by the transmission service provider. But looking at some of the other countries' experience, it is necessary that we treat transmission as a public good. And a part of the investment is done to ensure that transmission capacities are erected on time to facilitate evacuation of renewable energy. We have heard about the curtailment of renewable energy in the last 1 year. And to avoid that, it's essential that transmission lines are up and ready. But the good news is that CTU, the Central Electricity Authority, are aware of this problem and they have started planning for another 300 gigawatt of renewable energy capacity. In addition, the battery energy storage system also provides a lot of relief for the issue of curtailment as well as surplus power generation during the daytime. The recent tenders that we have done in SECI suggest that RE round the clock power can be provided at a very decent rate. The last discovered price was only 5 rupees 25 paise per unit, which has a clear blend of solar, wind, and battery energy storage system. So when it comes to firm and reliable power, now we are confident that from RE also, we are in a position to provide firm and reliable power. And that is going to probably revolutionize the electricity supply in future. The very fact that firm, affordable, and reliable power can come from renewable energy is something which India will be establishing before the world. And I think the beginning has been made with the kind of FDRE tenders and RTC tenders which SECI has done in the recent past.
Mr. Thati, apart from Make in India, you're also trying to make for the world. You've got forayed into manufacturing. What are the kind of challenges you see, again, because of geopolitical turbulence, supply chain issues? How much is it impacting your business? How much do you think the industry overall is impacted by these disruptions?
Yeah, so if we look at that particular question from 2 points, first, if we see from in terms of the country's readiness for export as a country, and specific, if I speak for wind, I think today the ecosystem which is built out, we have almost 2,500 MSMEs working across the sector, which are built over the last 3 decades. And the total manufacturing capacity on an annual basis we have today across all components is in excess of 25 gigawatts. As a country, we do about This year, we should be doing close to about 8 gigawatts of wind installations. So there is that significant higher capacity available. So from a supply chain point of view, we are very well positioned. Also, lucky in case of wind is that the material that is used across the supply chain, we don't have any rare earth materials. So we are not dependent on any kind of complications of global geopolitics to hamper our exports. So that's another beautiful part of our wind is concerned. And, you know, from a readiness, from a product, technology, IP, world-class competitive performance, I think huge respect for wind and its wind value chain across the world. So a good portion of this balanced capacity is already getting exported. If you see the last global wind energy report, by 2030, we are expecting wind energy from India to, as a supply chain, to contribute to almost 10% of the global wind supply chain. And if all goes well, that should expand to about 20% by 2035. So the trajectory is there. Of course, we have the global dynamics which keep playing positive, negative at times in terms of where we can do what we can do. But industry to industry collaboration is going pretty well across whether it's India to the northern hemisphere, India to the southern hemisphere for rest of the countries. I think we are very well placed as far as wind energy is concerned from that. So I think like any other areas, challenges are there, but one peculiar challenge that exporters from India face when they want to go to the global market is that we don't have a global bank from India. So when we go to do large projects overseas, we are at a disadvantage where I don't have my home bank with me. And that puts us at a little disadvantaged stage to kind of compete in the global markets. This is something that we are working with the ministries to see how we can find a solution to this. Because if we can get this fixed, then I think it will be a big benefit. Additionally, I think there are silver linings of the new trade agreements that are happening, like the current EU trade agreement which has happened. We are currently working again with the ministries to see later this year we have the global wind conference in Hamburg, where with EU and India we are trying to see how we can accelerate the RE trade relationships in a bigger way. So I think wherever the trade agreements are happening between India and rest of the world, fortunately, most of the markets today have a great RE potential. It's just that they have not harnessed it. Now it's a great time because the economic viability is making it as the cheapest source of energy for almost all countries. So I think there is huge acceptance of renewable energy now across geographies. So I think from an export point of view, wind has an excellent opportunity, and India can actually be that clean tech partner in this particular sector, and where we are not dependent on other countries for our supply chain. That's very important.
Sunita, when we look at the nuclear sector, there are two questions that arise. One is, of course, affordability of nuclear power, and the other is the kind of technical expertise you need. It's often said India has a huge demographic dividend. We have a huge young population, but there's also a talent shortage at top firms, top engineering, IT majors. So, do you feel that manpower crunch impacts your sector or the energy sector? Are you feeling that shortage somewhere?
Thank you, Anup. So I want to address the affordability question. And so, in 2010, India had a solar target of 20,000 megawatt by 2020. India also had a nuclear target at the same time, the same target, 20,000 megawatts nuclear by 2020. So look what happened. In solar, we actually ended up doubling that target. And in nuclear, we've yet to achieve half of it. We're at currently 8.8 gigawatts. So I think there are many lessons to be learned from what happened on the solar side. And as I said earlier, we're not competing. We're really complementing the landscape of energy and the mix in India. So many lessons learned in the models and incentives. I guess the platforms that were established at the government level to promote renewable energy, in that case, particularly solar, and I think in wind also. So if we can take some of those models, concepts, and apply them to nuclear, because nuclear, I believe firmly, should be on par and considered a green energy. So this is an opportunity also in this affordability dialogue and discussion for India to lead the conversation. How do we, make nuclear considered to be a part of that green energy package? And I know the government is working on it here, but we have an opportunity to show some international leadership as well. So on resources, I think that, again, we need to be not just looking at our domestic need, but we also know that nuclear is going to be expanding rapidly around the world. And there is an opportunity for India to also show its leadership there. But yes, as a private sector developer, we will be having to deal with or predict where there might be constraints or compressed demands on even the regulator, on the designer of the technology, on us as a developer, on the construction manpower, on the fabricators of the equipment. So all of that, but there is an opportunity, again, even with AI and solutions, ed use cases, where we can overcome those things by being smarter in the way that we do things. The last time this much capacity was projected for nuclear was probably the closest example is in United States in the 1970s and 80s. 20 years, which is what we have between now and 2047 to reach 100 gigawatt nuclear. So the US did approximately the same thing, but now we have so many other things available to us in terms of technology and our approach and the lessons learned from other countries and also in India. So I could take the example, let's say you're sending your design for review by the regulator. If the regulator has access to all the prior information, or you're bringing in a technology from outside, that would expedite the review. So it's not going to take 2 years, 3 years. It can actually be much faster. Or in your engineering design, if you can take AI technology into the project management space, how do you look at the risk management? It's key for financing and banking your project is what are the ways you're going to mitigate risks that might happen, delays that could happen. So many, many aspects that we can be much smarter about today. And since we're taking the lead around the world in building that much capacity in such a short time, we need to leverage all those things. So, and I also think there's a third piece, especially with World Bank here, is there are some aspects, if we can do innovative models of bringing in new technology from outside or existing technology, that there may need to be some enablers, because we cannot use just the PHWR here in India to reach that 100 gigawatt. So, in addition to making things more affordable through being on par with renewable, I think some innovative mechanisms. I don't think localization is going to suffice to bring in other technologies into India. We have to think in other ways to overcome, for example, some models where the IP, the government takes the IP of those technologies or purchases them, and then the private sector is able to use them. Again, what can we do to really elevate this quickly and all safely, but using technology behind it, plus innovative financial schemes?
Everybody on the panel has talked about the issue of raising financial capital. Paul, if you could explain a little bit of that, especially when you look at Western economies and the green transition, and you look at developing economies like India, how do you see that whole sector panning out vis-a-vis raising of finance and private sector mobilization?
I think it's very critical. As I mentioned before, let's say the World Bank group is becoming more of a unified group. Basically, we have our World Bank arm where I am sitting, which is a public financing arm of the World Bank. We have the IFC, which is the private sector arm, and we have MIGA, which is our guarantee facility. So as we design projects, we are really looking from a project financing point of view, what type of risks and what type of risk appetite there is. Some of them are regulatory. So we have programs with governments. People think that the World Bank is a lot about financing, but we are much more about knowledge than financing. That the reason why our financing comes along is because the governments and the private sector wants our knowledge. So what we bring a lot to the table is basically work with governments to understand, what are the regulatory risks and what need to be done to address those. And we have much more like the policy level dialogue with governments that tackles that. And then on top of it, we have, of course, concessional financing that is very often used and will increasingly be used to de-risk early stages of development of programs. So we have the famous saying now, and you will hear our president saying this very often, we are moving from being a financing bank to a leveraging bank. And it is not like some nice jargon. It's really rethinking a little bit how we use our, I would say, concessional capital to really help governments de-risk certain projects and do very often the early stages of project financing. And then as we see that the private sector can take some of the risk, we can use the guarantees to bring in the private sector. And finally, when things are more matured, we can basically allow the private sector to take. And that's a little bit the story with the renewables, where we feel like the kind of pure renewable investments in solar and wind are basically nowadays don't need much private sector. We are working a little bit with more poorer people to get them access to, let's say, some of these technologies. So we are more on the demand side, helping to increase the uptake for some of the lower income households. But in terms of hardcore investments, we are not much needed. So we should not use that capital there. We will be using it because a lot of the wind or the solar cannot come because the grid is not getting where it should go or it's not integrated into systems. And you had asked, and I forgot to answer the issue of the data centers, which is on everybody's mind. I don't want to single them out. We always have an economic view of things, like a government view of things. And we still believe that there are humongous efficiency gains that you will get from using data centers and AI in your overall economy. Of course, at the local level, you need to do some carrying capacity assessment of in where you put that data center, how is the grid? Because the biggest constraints for data centers in the future and now is energy and water. So basically, we all are conscious about this. So when you do a strategic planning of these data centers, you need to kind of be very careful where you put them. But still, I believe personally that I think the gains on the overall economy side, the efficiency gains, and hopefully with the use of AI, we can even increase the efficiencies of these data centers, that they become less resource intensive, as many of our technologies have become less resource intensive. We are in the first stage, probably what we are thinking about now, 100 years from now, people would laugh at and say, that type of technology is so outdated, as we laugh at some of the technology from maybe 100 years ago in terms of what we can do now. So things will change, but I definitely believe that even now, the benefits of AI and the benefits of technology and data, using our data in terms of making better policies, still outweigh the kind of energy intensity that some of these data centers will have at the economic level of a country.
Just to add, in terms of, if we were to look at what are the top two things that could hold back significant scale up of renewable adoption. One, what Sir answered in terms of the transmission, because I think that's the one which is, there's a lag between the speed of the industry versus the infrastructure. Other area which can really unlock the potential is capital. I think today the capital coming into play in India is short-term capital. We are not getting the long-term capital. And the infrastructure projects need that 30-year plus capital into the system. We are getting under 10 years capital. And this is limiting the size of growth that we can achieve. So again, we are working with various ministries to see how we can work out a design. If we can get that long capital to come in a bigger way, because technically, if you see the biggest component of cost for RE projects is the cost of capital, because fuel cost is zero. So if we can kind of change that dynamics, it can have a multifold growth in the industry. So I think that's the other very important element.
Mr. Sarangi, the government has been working keenly on ease of doing business and on deregulation. How much of that you think is already playing out, and what more are you working on as we look to scale up in such a big way towards this priority sector?
I think one of the big interventions in the electricity sector was deregulating the generation and unbundling of the different activities, generation, transmission, and distribution. So that was one big reform which helped growth of RE. Over and above that, the mandate for a renewable purchase obligation, renewable consumption obligation under Energy Conservation Act has helped facilitate RE's growth in a big way. There was a decision in 2021 to provide ISTS waiver for 4 years till 25, and then a phased reduction, which also has helped DISCOMs in deciding their procurement decision of RE. So a number of things have been done for RE to facilitate the growth of RE. As far as ease of doing business, deregulation is concerned, I think before coming here as Secretary of MNRE, I was DGFT, DG Foreign Trade. And I thought that the intensity and level of industry interaction was very high. But after coming to MNRE, I discovered that the industry consultation is one of the highest here in this particular ministry. So to that extent, getting regular feedback from our stakeholders and working with different departments, different ministries, different authorities, including regulatory authorities like CERC, has been a constant endeavor of Ministry of New and Renewable Energy. And that has helped us in facilitating the RE developers and RE manufacturers issue in many ways. In addition, schemes like PLI, ALMM, use of BCD to regulate import and exports, etc., have also facilitated the growth of manufacturing in our country. Today, in module manufacturing, India is the second largest player with about 214 gigawatt capacity. Cell, we have about 33 gigawatt of capacity. And in wind energy, we have 24 gigawatt of manufacturing capacity. So that tells us that the ways in which government, industry, and state government, central government and state government, along with the industry, have worked on various ways in which deployment, market creation, and growth of DRE, all of these go hand in hand for the growth of RE.
I'll add one more question, and I'd like all of you to weigh on that issue. Is, despite the RE scale up, the fact is, whenever we go to climate conferences or anywhere else, they will be talking about how India relies heavily on coal-based power. And the question in the room is always, when will India manage to phase out of, get out of the coal dependency and get in full time into or find energy security within our resources? How do you see that kind of question? And what is the kind of, ambitious timeline, if you would have, from moving away from coal?
I think the issue of energy trilemma is well known, where you have to reconcile the apparent contradictions between reliability, affordability, and energy security. Considering India's unique position and the growth trajectory that we have undertaken, there has to be a reasonable mix of stable base power, which is coal power, along with growth of RE, which and this is, I think, quite well done by the Central Electricity Authority, which does a mapping of resource adequacy for each state. And in this, the variety of mix, how much of nuclear power, how much of hydro, how much of thermal, how much of solar, that mix is worked out between CEA and the state government, and a national roadmap is done. So that resource adequacy map uh, uh, is a good pointer towards India's growth trajectory. But I believe that instead of remaining focused on reduction of coal, increase of RE, or RE versus coal debate, what we need to undertake at this point of time is what is the right mix for India's growth, India's future power demand, and accordingly work towards it. As far as the end goal is concerned, by 2070, net zero ambition is something that all of us are agreed upon, which is the pathway, which is the year-wise schedule through which we will reach it is an issue which we'll address through resource adequacy, but we firmly remain committed to a net zero ambition by 2070.
Just to add to what sir is saying, I think that end goal of 2070 is kind of set out very clearly by the Prime Minister. I think this year has been one fundamental shift which has happened, and that gives us an opportunity to advance that 2070 ahead. And that is for the first time we've been able to now see the biggest challenge renewable energy faces is the firmness of power. And that is the reason you need the fossil fuel to provide the base load, because you need a 24/7 power availability, and wind and solar can't give you that. This year has been fundamentally different because for the first time, and as Sarangiji mentioned, that the price discovery of a bid which was mimicking a thermal bid was done for RE. A combination of wind, solar storage together to deliver the same load pattern of a thermal power. And we've been able to discover the pricing, and the bid has gone through, where we are able to make renewable energy at a price point which is cheaper than today's new thermal power project. So I think that turning point is a very important, because for India, it's a very price sensitive market, and affordability is the key concern for us. And therefore, it's important that unless we cannot have that least cost option, which is also sustainable, that transition becomes a challenge. That's the reality of life. So I'm very confident that in coming years, we will see that 2070 goal will actually get advanced.
Nita, if you could also weigh in on that.
Sure, absolutely. So when we talk about baseload, the way to this path to reduce our dependency on fossil fuel is going to be to increase the percentage of the baseload that is nuclear. Today, that percentage in India stands at 3%. So under the Shanti Act, with the liberalization, allowing the private sector in, and also the expansion plans of the current MPCIL and also NTPC, so two government entities that will also be building nuclear power, you're going to see significant growth. So that portion, I hope that we can get to a mix that's, even 50-50. So by doing that, then you have a diversified base of base load that then is moving you away from just depending on coal.
I will leave the last word with you largely on the issue. What is your view in this? And is it even desirable to aim for a total doing away of coal? Is it possible and desirable?
I think it's possible, and yes, I would love to see everything to be decarbonized, if you would ask me personally. Now, I think what everybody has said is critical. This is the affordability and what's the time frame. Definitely, everything what the government is doing and what we are supporting is to kind of create a right incentive for these renewables and let's say, fossil fuel type of energy forms to become more affordable. And as they become more affordable and more competitive, coal will naturally start phasing out. And of course, coal also is a finite resource, as is oil and many other of the fossil fuels that we have. So instead of focusing on how quickly, I always look at the positive side of things, on where we need to put our funding, where we need to create the right incentives. I think things will move rather quickly without any particular goal. Even the goals that we set today, my feeling is with the right type of policies and the right type of investments, we will get there much quicker than we think. So right now, India has a certain need in terms of energy. It needs to grow. It needs affordable energy. We don't want to create energy that then governments need to subsidize, because then we complain that they are spending too much money on things like subsidies. So it's a fine balance where we will be working with the government on seeing how quickly we can introduce new forms of energy, finding the right mix
But
of
I'll
energy.
interject. Even given the kind of geopolitical turbulence we are seeing, is it that's what I'm saying? Is it desirable?
I think yes. I definitely think I would love to not see any CO2. Now, probably we'll find our next problem, because we are incredible in kind of solving one problem in the world and creating the next. So we will have other problems maybe to solve for our children and others, but future generations. But the thing about, we all know the consequences of CO2 emissions and everything else. So we can reduce it. Maybe we find that a certain minimum base load where there is a natural balance of what comes in and out is fine. I cannot tell you, but I think what I will tell you is that we will put a lot of work with the government of India on creating the right mix. And then in all of it, as you have said before as well, see, hydro has a big storage. Let's say it's all about storage, and coal we can provide 24 hours a day. And the biggest problem with solar and wind very often is that we have certain peak in the day that there is more energy coming in. Sometimes energy on the spot price goes to zero because there's the own demand and there's a humongous supply. So we need to work a lot on the management of these systems. That's what I'm coming back to, and on creating storage systems that will work hand in hand with some of these new technologies and renewables coming in. And I think, again, we will have this economic view of the right balance of all of these things. And then naturally, in my view, I predict coal to be phased out over time. But that will take some time, and the needs are bigger. And again, for us right now is the delta. What are we investing in terms of the delta and the increase in demand that's coming? Are we bringing in, the kind of renewables and other type of energies that are needed, also green hydrogen, nuclear? I really believe the right mix is what create a secure, energy secure country, what we're aiming for, and affordable. Thank you.
Any final thoughts, Mr. Sarangi, on what your expectation also would be of the private sector when we're looking to scale up like this?
We have already discussed the issue and challenges of mobilizing finances for the RE. And for our 500 gigawatt trajectory, there is a requirement of $300 billion of investment. And for that to come in, the government would work towards providing the policy certainty and creating an ecosystem which supports the market mechanism. So from that point of view, there has been a constant endeavor to design schemes which supports market creation. For example, a PM Suryaghar kind of scheme has ensured that today we have 34,000 vendors working across the country, and each of these vendor employs nearly 5 to 10 persons. So nearly 340,000 people are working in the area of PM Suryaghar. Similarly, PM Kusum has unlocked the huge potential for farm solarization and agri-feeder solarization. And that has also kickstarted a diversified and decentralized rural economy where you require a lot of skilled personnel to take care of this. So in future, I think from the perspective of RE, the mobilization of resources that Mr. Girish Tanti was mentioning, the effort toward creation, towards market creation, and also green jobs creation and supporting skills in this particular segment would be one of our focus areas.
Thank you so much. It was indeed a very insightful discussion, and I hope it was a meaningful one for everybody. Thank you so much for your time.
Energy security, affordability, and sustainability may not always pull neatly in the same direction, but the path forward will depend on finding a balance that can hold as India needs continue to grow. Mr. Sarangi, Mr. Tanti, Ms. Kumar, Mr. Porsi, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Anubhuti, for drawing the best out of each one of them.
For security reasons, may I request everybody to please remain seated? Please remain seated for security reasons. Once again, we'd like to thank the partners who helped make the Economic Times World Leaders Forum 2026 possible. Our presenting partner, Spec Finance, powered by Visa, co-powered by Suzlon and Casa Grande.
Our category partners Google and RRP Defence Limited, our knowledge partner PwC, our state partner Government of Maharashtra, Government of Madhya Pradesh, Government of Bihar, Government of Chhattisgarh, Government of Uttarakhand, and our tourism partner Delhi Tourism.
And of course, our associate partners, IOB, Chennai Port Authority, GMDC, Skoda, Anand Technologies, and Rasna Foundation and Truecaller.
I see a lot of familiar faces here from day one and a lot of new faces as well. And I'm sure you've saked in a lot of nuggets from the last 2 days. So, ladies and gentlemen, please make sure that you share it generously on social media. While you do that, please make sure that you use a hashtag, which is hashtag ETWLF 2026. And also, please download the networking app, which is the ETWF networking app to connect with the speakers and fellow attendees from Apple App Store or from the Google Play Store.
All right, that brings us to the next session. I'm just informed it'll take a couple of more minutes. Thank you for your patience.
More with Visa Power.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we now turn to a relationship that has spent years being described as a strategic partnership. What is becoming more interesting is what the next stage of that partnership actually looks like.
Because increasingly, it is about what India and the United States can build together. Trade, defense technology, advanced manufacturing, critical minerals, and more resilient supply chains are all becoming part of the same larger conversation.
And our next guest sits at the center of that engagement in New Delhi at a time when both countries are looking to deepen the economic and strategic foundations of that relationship.
Ladies and gentlemen, our next conversation is titled India and the US from Strategic Partnership to a Global Power Partnership. In conversation with Executive Editor, ET Politics, Pranab Dhalsamanta, please, with a generous round of applause, let's welcome onto the stage United States Ambassador to India, Sergio Gore.
Good afternoon, Ambassador Gore. Welcome to the Economic Times World Leadership Forum. Though this is your first time physically present, let me tell you, when the announcement came last time from White House that you were being sent as ambassador here, you were present in spirit, literally, because the whole room was talking about who is Sergio Gore. And that we seem to have, at that point, started off on a wrong foot with the Trump administration second time around, unexpectedly. So I just wanted your broad overview and what have you done to fix it?
Well, thank you for having me here today, Pranab. It's great to be here with the Economic Times, and I actually cut my trip short to come back here. As you
Thank
and
you.
I spoke at the at-home reception just a couple days ago, but I was determined to be here. So thank you for having me here today. I see some friends in the audience, including the great ambassador from Canada. Always happy to see you and along others with these bright lights. Look, the relationship is very important to us. And the fact that our president and Prime Minister Modi have such a deep and personal friendship makes it a lot easier for me, frankly. Because it's one of those things, as you might have seen in public. I traveled with President Trump to the G7 2 months ago in Evian, and they brought in the cameras. And I'll share this anecdote with everybody here. We were behind the scenes, behind the stage. And at one point, it was just the president and I, and he asked me, he goes, what are the Indians going to raise? And we went over some topics. And he said, do they have any asks? And the MEA had one ask. He said, and it was, let's bring in the media, but let's not do a full press conference. No questions. And so I told the president, I said, the Indians prefer no questions. He said, sure, no problem. So the meeting starts, the press comes in, there must have been 50 cameras. The president's sitting here, the prime minister is sitting there. They both speak for a few minutes. As soon as they get done, the first thing the president does, he looks up at the camera and says, any questions? And that opened everything up. And he did a 45-minute press conference, and everything was on the table. And one of the things that they asked him was exactly what you just asked me. And the thing that the president said is, as long as my friend Prime Minister Modi is there, India will get what they need. And that is a true testament. And I'll tell you why. Because when the president was out, those 4 years, and I was with him down in Florida, a lot of people from around the world criticized the president. India did not. Your prime minister did not. And that's something the president remembers. So he holds that friendship in a very special place. When you're up, when you're in Oval Office, everybody wants to be your friend. But when you're out, that's when you can really realize who your friends are. And Prime Minister Modi was a true friend to him at that time. And so that makes this relationship work because they trust each other. It doesn't mean they agree on everything 100% of the times, right? Anyone here in our own family, you're going to have some disagreements. And sometimes with our family, we're much more honest with each other than publicly. So, but that relationship is anchored on that trust and on that friendship. And so my job is to bring to his attention what it is that we need to be working on. And so from a year ago to today, I've been able to raise that. I've been encouraging both sides to speak regularly. Almost on a monthly basis, there's a point of contact, whether it's in person at the G7 or on the phone or a vice president calling him and other high-level visits. So Secretary Rubio came here. He was here for 5 days. It was his
Contact
longest
at
trip.
the political level, you're saying.
Political levels, correct. So India matters to us, and we want to have the highest individuals from our government being here and participating. So not only was Secretary Rubio here for 5 days in May, he's coming back for another several-day trip in October, right? That's unheard of for us.
That's great. So, but just to be clear, you're saying that President Trump actually thinks that Prime Minister Modi stood by him during even the difficult times.
Correct. I think the prime minister was very clear, and it's one of those things you can look at the records. You can look at what European leaders said. You won't find those same comments coming out of India, and so they genuinely like each other. I mean that. And not all leaders are created equal. Our president and our prime minister get along great. In a way, they're very similar. They're both forward-leaning, and they want action fast, and they're results-driven. And so our president has tremendous respect for the prime minister.
Thank you for that. That was quite elaborative and revealing at many points. I want to just take, we have a business audience over here. So very quickly, Ambassador, what is the economic trajectory of our relationship, especially the energy side? Every time things go well, we have something which comes up, like we have this bill which cleared Senate with 100% tariffs on Russian oil buys. Something comes, and business likes policy certainty. This adds to the uncertainty. So first, your counsel, and I'll just add to it, where are we on the trade deal?
Great question. Look, the numbers don't lie, right? And this is not a dig at the Economic Times because I think you guys are great, but I love getting home in the evening and putting on the Indian shows in the evening. And the later it gets, the crazier the shows become. And so 6 p.m., you might have 8 people arguing, but by 10 p.m., it gets really good. There's 12 people on there, and they're all speaking at the exact same time, and you can't hear a single one of them. And I mean, they must train because it's unbelievable that nobody gets interrupted. They just keep going. No matter what, you just keep talking. But I'll be watching the news, and I used to think we have a fake news problem back home. Some of the things that get reported here are just nowhere close to the ballpark. And one of the things that you might have seen, this was public. At one point, there was a story that came out that the trade deals had collapsed. And I called my good friend Piyush Goyal, and I said, what are they talking about? Oh, you and I were in the same meeting. There was only 6 people. And so I told him, I said, I'm going to put something up publicly. He did the exact same thing. Rarely has a minister here in India put out something calling out fake news, right? But when you kind of have 6 people that all agree on one thing, but the news reports something else and it's all anonymous sources, it's worth pointing that out. The numbers don't lie. If you look at the trajectory of our relationship, just go by the numbers. And so 15 years ago, our bilateral trade was $20 billion. Today, it's $240 billion. That's not an accident. And it's continuing to grow. The two leaders set an ambitious goal of $500 billion in the next few years. We're on our way to getting there. The relationship is as strong as it's ever been, in spite of what the media might tell you. If you look at the energy imports that India is getting, it's unmatched. If you compare to a year ago, what India is importing from the United States, it's up by over 60% LPG, LNG. If you look at our pharma imports from India, our generic pharmaceuticals, we get 40% from India. If you look at military exercises, India has more military exercises with the United States than any other country, period. Not even close. And so when you look at these things, I agree with you. We do need stability. We do need certainty. We hear that from both sides. We hear that in India. We hear that in Washington. The trade deal is well on the way. In fact, within a month of me getting here, at one point we announced that we had a deal. The Supreme Court struck down a big part of what the deal was based on, the IEPA laws. So right now we're reconfiguring some of that text. But the trade deal is, in principle, almost everything is done. A lot of it is the legal technical language that needs to be sorted out. So I'm optimistic that we'll get done. In the last year, we've made tremendous progress with India, and that's a testament to the MEA here, to Dr. Jaishankar, to Piyush Goyal, to all these individuals who are invested in this relationship. What we do here over these few years will define this relationship for several decades ahead, period. This relationship will define the global stage. You have two of the biggest giants in business. You have two of the biggest economies. Us working together is a natural partnership. And you can look decade by decade and forget the daily bumps and the daily tweets and whatever you might hear. The relationship's been doing this decade by decade and growing. And I'm determined that it'll continue on that trajectory.
Your counsel on the bill, which is the 100% tariff bill, how do we read it over here?
Look, the bill is being pushed by Congress, right, in a very bipartisan way. This is not something that you have seen the White House advocate for. And I think that's important to understand is people here say, you know, President Trump is pushing this. You won't find a clip of President Trump pushing it. We'll see ultimately what happens with it. It passed the Senate. It passed the Senate in an overwhelmingly bipartisan vote. And again, why is it moving ahead? And the reason is, of course, it impacts India. But the underlying cause is the president from day one has been wanting to end this war between Russia and Ukraine. And he's determined to bring an end to it. And so it's vitally important to us that at some point this war has to stop. It's week after week. You watch what is happening over there. It's a travesty on both sides. And so it's a tool in his toolkit to curb some of these funds from stemming and going over there.
Yeah, understand. I was there at that time when Secretary Rubio came and you had this wonderful function at Bharat Mandapam. You brought Quad back into center stage. My question is, what is the future of Quad when there is this conversation of a US-China G2 to understand what is the centrality of Quad in the US strategic vision now that we hear that Indo is also removed from, I know you clarified that, but the Indo-Pacific terminology is going some change. The real question is the centrality of the Quad and where does it stand in the context of US-China G2?
Look, I think that the two are not necessarily always connected. Our relationship with China is our relationship with China, right? And that's our bilateral relationship. And we want to get along. We want to get along with everyone around the world, as does India. India is going to be hosting BRICS here, right? So everybody, the reality is you got to be able to work with whoever's there. For India, you can't pick who your neighbors are. You can't get up and move. Neither can they. For us, we do have an economic relationship with China. And so we hope to build on that. The Quad is vitally important. And since I've gotten here, I've made it a priority back in Washington. So last year at the ministerial level, we had 0 meetings. This year, we're on track to have 5. And the secretary has me heavily involved in the Quad. So I've traveled with him both to ASEAN, which was the last Quad ministerial meeting in Manila just last month. The secretary will be coming here to India. But after India, we're actually going to continue, and he's going to travel to Australia. And that'll be another Quad meeting. And so we're on track to have 5 things. The reason the Quad exists is those are trusted partners. And people made a big deal here on the name change. I don't care what's on top of a letterhead. Look at where the commitment is and look at where the US is investing and what it is prioritizing. And so even before the secretary comes here in October, we're going to be having working level meetings on deliverables, on things that we can move forward, and whether that's enhanced naval security exercises, whether that's investing in ports in the Pacific. The reality is those four countries in the Quad are vitally important to each other, and those are the main players in that.
So thank you for the explanation on that. The other real concern coming out in India is that we've seen a growing profile for Pakistan in the Middle East. And aware of the adversarial relationship between India and Pakistan. And now we've had this Mecca Pact, where there is a NATO-like collective defense clause. How should India, and the US has backed it, so how should India see it as a threat or what? Because at the end of it, we do have an adversarial relationship with Pakistan.
Well, I think that's a great question for your next guest, Dr. Jaishankar. I'll let him comment on how India sees this. The one thing I will say is India's got great relations with Saudi Arabia, right? And so, they're part of this. But again, I'll defer to the wise wisdom of Dr. Jaishankar to comment on that. For us, we have bilateral relationships with everyone around the world. And the reality is, whether we like it or not, we have to work with the governments that are there. And so, yes, so that the president has engaged with everyone around the world, including some of your neighbors here. But if you're we don't necessarily compare countries. And so our relationship with India is our relationship with India. It is solid. It is huge. In a way, it's unmatched in the region, virtually, when you look at trade or defense exercises or pharma. Pick any sector, and the United States and India are working on it. So 2 weeks ago, we had a team from NASA here, and we invited ISRO to join us in our future moon, going back to the moon missions. We can invite other countries, but it doesn't mean they can get there. India can actually get there, so it matters more. And so pick any sector: aviation, military, pharma, energy. The US are working hand in hand. You can't say that about a lot of other countries in the world. The infrastructure is not there. The talent is not there. So we have so much going for this relationship. I had an ambassador call me recently from another country. I'm not going to mention which, but a US ambassador. And he's been there almost the exact same time that I've been here. And he said to me, "I'm bored." I said, "You're bored?" I said, "I don't have enough hours in my day." But that's the dynamic relationship that we have here. It doesn't exist everywhere in the world. I could see how some of our ambassadors might not have not 10% of what is happening here. And so to me, that's extremely gratifying.
You've been traveling a lot in India, some salubrious climbs. How has it been?
So I love traveling, period. I've traveled my whole life. I've been to 96 countries now. The reason I wanted to be ambassador to India is because I came to India the first time 15 years ago. And so I wanted to be in India for two reasons. One is the incredible potential that India has. And I keep talking about limitless potential, and I mean it. When you look back, remember where you are today, and look at it 10 years ago, what you're going to see between the United States and India will be at a level that is hard to imagine. What we're seeing with AI, with data centers, there's a reason all these companies are coming here, and Indian companies are going back to the United States. So you have all the embassies compete to bring funding to the US. We came in first. You have a European embassy that gets up and they'll announce $700 million in investments. And you have another Asian country that'll get up and announce $2 billion. We brought in over $20 billion just in the last 9 months or so, investments into the US. And on the flip side, whether it's Microsoft or Micron or Google, all of them are opening up hubs here in India. There's a reason for that. It's a great and it's a national partnership. So one of the reasons I wanted to be here is that potential, which is unmatched. It literally is unmatched around the world. The second reason is when I came here 15 years ago and I traveled with my parents all over India, India presented an incredible wow vision to me. And so whether it's the culture, it's the history, it's the food, but it's also the people. You will meet some of the friendliest people when you travel around India. The more people that I bring to India, and there's not a week that doesn't go by that I don't have visitors. And all these people have never been to India before. But when they come here and they see the India that I saw, and we have to get out of Delhi. I always tell them, I say, you got to get out of Delhi. Coming to Delhi doesn't count as coming to India. It's important. It's the government's here, but if you want to experience true India, get out of there, get out of here, and see something. And it's one of the reasons the secretary is coming back. Every single week, I have visitors coming. I got people arriving today on the 2 a.m. flight. I've memorized the time schedule of the flights that are coming from the U.S. because every week we have visitors.
Your visits are followed very closely, as you must have noticed. Anyhow, for the Indian youth, US is an aspirational place. We go there for education, jobs, but the political landscape of the US has changed, and whether Indians are welcome, not welcome. How should the Indian youth look at this aspirational index that it has followed for so many years? Because I'm sure you're dealing with visa requests and things like that. How should Indian youth look at the new US or the changing political landscape of the US?
Well, you call it change. I'm not necessarily sure. I'd go that far. I'll address two things. One is with this administration, President Trump was very clear that we want a safe and secure border, and that includes knowing who comes in. But that's not targeted at India. But today, when students apply to visit the United States, one of the things we look at is online presence. So what is that person? What have they been saying online, whether that's Twitter or YouTube or any other forum? And unfortunately, and this is not targeted towards India, but the days of you tweeting death to America and then showing up at an embassy asking for a visa are over. We're not going to let you in. And so and by the way, India does the exact same thing. When you're coming here applying for a visa, you get asked all sorts of questions. And several people plenty of people get denied, frankly. And that's India's right. You should be able to determine who is allowed into your country. In previous administration, we had millions of individuals who would overstay their visas in the United States. So today, that is a top priority for this administration. It is a top priority that we secured our southern border. We would have millions of individuals pouring in across the southern border. We didn't know who they are, where they're from, what they're doing. And a lot of that, by the way, it translated into nefarious activities. Not everybody wants to come through the southern border to visit Disneyland. And so every country has a right to know who's coming in. I've heard your prime minister speak. You could pull sentences out of his speech and put them in President Trump's speech because they're identical, that no country should be forced to take another country's illegal immigrants. And so we fully agree with that. In terms of students that you mentioned, there is such a high demand of Indian students wanting to go to the United States. And they do very well at our schools. One of the things that I've started looking at is actually bringing U.S. institutions to India. The demand is there. Just last night, I was speaking with the provost of MIT. We have a great amount of universities that are interested in coming here, and I'm determined over the next year that we will have some of that happen. And we're talking to the top schools, whether that's NYU, Harvard, Purdue. We're going to see some of that happening over the near future, and we're confident that'll happen.
But if it is a one-line message to Indian talent, young talent, which has played a role in the United States, what would that be?
A one line. It's hard to summarize in one line, but look, it's the United States wants to work with India. Period. Right. That's what it comes down to. That's been the president's message, and that extends to the youth, but it extends beyond also. And so you pick any U.S. company, there's incredible Indian talent. So whether that's Google or Microsoft or Micron, those are good things that we're working together on, and that's something that'll continue to happen. The people-to-people ties are incredible. They're unmatched. There's such a high demand of people that wanting to go to the United States that makes it difficult, frankly. India's just such a massive place. It would be impossible for us to accommodate the whole world. There's a study out there by the Pew Research Foundation. And it's a couple of years old. But the Pew Foundation did a poll around the world, and they asked, how many of you would want to move to the United States tomorrow, globally? And the number was over 900 million. That's impossible for us to take 900 million in 1 year, right? So that's not going to happen. And so for us, we want people that contribute to the United States. We want people that contribute to this relationship. That's something that's happened. That'll continue to happen. And I'll tell you this, the demand has not gone down because it's very hard to get an appointment, even for a visa today.
Yeah, I know that. On that note, sir, thank you so much. And it was a great pleasure to have you. And thank you for making time for the Economic Times. And we hope to see you more often, both in our events and in our newspaper.
Thank you so much for having me today. Thank you.
The India-US relationship has no shortage of ambition. What matters now is how much the two countries can deliver together. Ambassador Gaur, thank you so much for joining us. And thank you so much, Pranav Dhal, for drawing the best out of this conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, can we see him off with a bigger round of applause?
We began today with Uttarakhand's economic ambitions and then widened the lens to a global balance of power in flux. From there, the morning took us through global supply chains, the growth ambitions of Madhya Pradesh, the new energy order, and the next chapter of the India-US relationship.
So if there's an idea, a line, or a question from this morning that has stayed with you, please make sure that you share it using a hashtag ETWLF 2026. And please don't forget to tag the Economic Times.
Another reminder, if this morning has put someone on your must-meet list, you can do that using the ETWLF networking app. You can download it from the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. You can find fellow attendees and set up one-to-one meetings directly through the app.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for lunch. But when we return, India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Shankar, joins us for a conversation on India's place in a changing world.
And we'll resume at 2:45 p.m. sharp. Until then, enjoy lunch in the Shah Jahan Hall.